Chapter 26, Awakening. Disclaimer, I own no franchise mentioned in this work. Halo belongs to 343, Mass Effect to BioWare. I am not spoiling anything from Infinite in this chapter, but I absolutely will in other chapters. There's a bit of a review of the game below, no spoilers, and I only played the campaign. Multiplayer gameplay looks great, but everything else with the store and maps and playlists is total garbage. So, it's been 5 years since I started this story. That is weird to think about. I haven't gotten out a chapter every month like I did the first year of this story, but it's not abandoned by any means. As for Infinite, it was decent. Definitely missing some things that should have been there, both as a game and as a story. It's certainly better than 5. My main problem with the story is that it happens after everything interesting and before everything important. It occupies this weird space between events that makes it feel very meaningless. This is most certainly not helped by the missing features of co-op. I am really hoping that they aren't stupid and they continue the story with DLC or something, as I do not want to wait another 3 or 5 or whatever years for us to understand what is going on. Unfortunately, the complete lack of updates to anything except multiplayer is not encouraging, and even that mode is very barebones even now. To summarize, the gameplay of Infinite is fantastic. It feels good to play, it looks great, it sounds amazing, but the story is incomplete. Think of it as Halo, CE if that game ended after the famous First Flood cutscene in 343 Guilty Spark. You can hopefully see why, as a storyteller, I find that decision to be incredibly irritating. It gives a mystery, you work your way through it, the tension builds as you come closer to the truth, and just as you are about to find out what is going, it ends. What Muppet thought that was a good idea? My point in this is that I am, unfortunately, not inspired to be writing this story at a constant pace. I am not abandoning it or setting it hiatus. There will be more. I still love Halo and Mass Effect, and I love this story. Halo Infinite did not kill my love of Halo, it was just not what it could have been. For now, however, I hope you enjoy. July 18th, 2180/1 ST day of 8th month, 2459/July 18, 2589. Novaria. Peak 15. There had been nothing but silence for so long. The frenzied, chaotic song of her mother's had ceased shortly after her departure, their final notes speaking only of sadness and regret. Nothing but the endless void to keep her company as her ship was cast adrift in the endless sea of stars. So it had been for 1,000 years, and so she expected it to be for the next 1,000 as well. Yet now there was another song, strange and foreign and like nothing she had ever heard before. It was obviously not that of the mothers, its pattern far too different from theirs. Neither was it the corrupting song of oily shadows that had done so much harm, leading all of the mothers astray as they fell under its notes. No, this was none of those, nothing that she had heard before. It was unique, as that of all species were, but in a way that she had never heard before. There was something else, a different song running underneath. It was only a short time later that she found herself finally emerging from the egg that had kept her safe. For the first time in 1,000 years Arachne Queen touched the surface of a planet, once again breathed its air. Much to her surprise, the song which had greeted her faded away, though it was not replaced by silence but rather a discordant cacophony of noise. Numerous environments were arrayed around her, each with its own song clashing against the others. For several weeks she simply existed and grew, feeding off the various piles of food delivered to her through an unknown means. Eventually she gained enough cognizance to realize that the environment around her was artificial, each section built out to find what she preferred. It was as if the species that had found her knew nothing of the Arachne, an unlikely thing if those they had fought before still existed. Even if they did not know of the crimes committed so long ago, the beings who had found her seemed to exercise an incredible amount of caution all the same as she explored the boundaries of her cage. She was almost fully grown when she finally saw those who had rescued her. They did not seem afraid of her, only curious even as she approached the window from which they watched. Their song was still hidden to her and thus so was any form of communication. She could not tell them that she would soon start laying eggs and creating her own nest, a process which would require vastly more space than she had. It seemed that her saviors turned captors were not completely ignorant of her needs, as only a few days later she was guided through a series of metal tunnels out from the enclosure she had known and into a vast field of green. While not exactly the usual environment that the Arachne had inhabited, it was perfectly fine for a new hive to be built. As she explored her new environment, she noted the facility in which she had spent her time so far. It was an unimpressive building, with a large facade of glass and a wide open area that served as a landing pad, all cast in the shadow of a formidable tower. Beings were clearly visible to the Queen as she watched a small shuttle lift off into the atmosphere, but even then she still could not hear their song. Her hive quickly began to take shape once the first Arachne workers were mature. Several of them were already beginning to expand her initial efforts, their actions guided by her own song as she waited to lay yet more eggs. She had yet to lay any soldiers, their presence hardly necessary when basic survival was far more critical to her existence. When she had first heard the song of the strange people that had rescued her, it had been distant, a unique song amongst the few she had heard. When she heard it for the first time on this new planet, she reveled in its intricacy, marveled at its melody. Excited as she was to finally meet this new species, she was unwilling to leave the security of her newly created hive, paltry as that may have been in the face of a spacefaring civilization. Instead she sent one of her workers out to lead the newcomers to her, a test to see what they would do. Somewhat to her surprise, they did not immediately attack the worker and actually seemed to be far more curious than afraid. Eventually the small group came within her sight, allowing her to dismiss the worker back to its regular duties. There were 4 beings, each bipedal with a body much like that of the Asari. 2 of them were heavily armored, their weapons clearly meant for war, yet neither appeared concerned as they slowly approached her form. The other 2 were clad in cloth, one wearing a bland suit with only a single insignia upon it and the other a patterned shirt and sturdy blue leggings. She watched them cautiously, encouraged that they did not appear hostile but also aware that that could easily change. For some time they simply watched her, words that she did understand passing between them. Now that they were close, the queen could bask in their song. It spoke of curiosity and ingenuity, yet was also tainted with dark undertones of conflict and hate. There was far more to them than the simple war song of the Krogans or the duplicitous lilt of the Solarians. It wasn't that they lacked the harmony of the Rachni but rather that they were almost the opposite, much like how the Asari had a slightly unique song for every individual. Focusing on them, however, the queen found the same disturbing song that she had first brushed upon when meeting them. It was old, so very old, far more so than even the corrupting notes that had driven the Rachni to conflict 1,000 years before. Ancient beyond comprehension, it flowed beneath their individual melodies with an ethereal beauty that was only matched by its unyielding strength. Even young as she was, the Rachni queen could tell that the song was a warning, a sign that these beings were not to be trifled with. Whatever had interwoven their songs together had been powerful, enough to know of the song and alter it with finesse. Not even the song of oily shadows which had ensnared the Rachni had such a quality, its notes rough and intentions clear. This was not that, even she could not tell why this song ran through these beings. Since she could not talk with these newcomers directly, she reached out to sing to them by plucking their strings of thought. As she did so, the individual song faded away as the ancient melody surged to protect them. The biological quantum entanglement that enabled the hive mind of the Rachni became her leash as she tried to withdraw, only to find herself held in place. She fought against the bonds to no avail, her physical body frozen in place while her mind struggled against the unexpected defense. Nothing in the millennia of genetic knowledge she had acquired from countless queens before her seemed to help, for only the Rachni were known to have mastered the song so well. A moment of disorientation overcame her as the ancient song pulled at her mind, only to suddenly disappear with a last, somber note. For several seconds the last queen of the Rachni waited, sure that she would soon embrace the silence that had taken the rest of her kind. That end never came as a new song reached her, its notes soft and swift as they drifted by. It was similar to that which had brought her here, and yet different in a way, as if it were more complete. Relaxing slightly from her defensive posture, the queen allowed herself to hear this new melody. She did not know how long she listened, time fading away as she lost herself in the beautiful harmony before her. Countless notes came to her, each speaking of an existence of which she was not aware, eons of knowledge encapsulated in this mystical place. Her attention was eventually drawn away by something else, a presence that she could feel but not see. For all other beings that the Rachni had met, their songs were clear, different in each their own way but always distinct. Whatever was near her now was subtle, so utterly immersed in this strange place that it was just as much a part of it as the very notes that created its song. Suddenly the ancient song faded away and was replaced with one that the queen was familiar with as she listened to the song of her own people. More than 1,000,000 years of Rachni history laid out in meticulous detail, passed from queen to queen and finally to her in the last dying moments of her species. All of the information, all of the secrets, all of who the Rachni were was on display for her to see as it was forcefully drawn from her. When the last few notes faded, there was only silence left. Once again the ancient song of this place returned, picking up with contemptuous ease and enveloping her own song. Disparate flashes of memory crashed into her as the song of the Rachni was absorbed into the whole, the experience of billions integrating into the harmony without any effect. It was only then that she truly understood a small bit about the place in which she found herself. The memory of countless species recorded over the span of eons, far longer than most beings could truly understand. Even she could only comprehend that the song around her was old, but not what secrets might be held in such a repository of information. The presence from before was still there, lurking at the edge of her attention as it seemed to watch her with calm apathy. Time held little meaning here, and so she only knew that it was some time later when the being became curious, its notes changing to match the shift in its attention. A barrage of notes assailed her, overwhelming the queen as she turned towards the denizen of this place. It quickly faded, giving her reprieve from the unexpected communication and leaving a short melody that simply said, "Your return is unexpected, but not unwelcome." "Return?" the queen asked, her single note of curiosity and confusion quickly becoming lost in the ambient melody. Regardless, the presence seemed to understand as it replied, what was lost so long ago is no longer, but has yet to be found by the inheritors. We do not understand of what you sing, the queen stated unapologetically. So it shall remain, the presence informed her. Turning from side to side, the queen rumbled in irritation as she realized that the presence came from all directions. Letting some of that anger slip through, she demanded, how can you sing? It is only the Rachni that know of the songs, the others are flat and colorless. Your song is one of many, as is how you sing. Where you hear songs, I see information. We are not the same, and yet we both understand, it explained calmly. We have never met another who understands. We ask that you do not hide, so we may sing as one, the queen requested. What you do not see may not be hidden, the presence stated indifferently. All the same, a small being appeared before the queen, causing her to draw back in surprise as she looked upon another one of the small bipedal beings that had greeted her only a short time ago. Before she could comment on the appearance, it shifted, turning first into an Asari, then a Solarian, a Krogan, several species she did not recognize, and then for a short moment a Protein, before finally settling as the appearance of the first queen. Agitated from the unexpected display, she hissed, what are you? I am the guardian of this place, its prisoner and protector, both ward and warden. Created to organize the knowledge of those who came before, those whose time has passed, and those who are yet to come, it answered. What is this place that requires such a guardian? She pressed. The domain, it responded, as if it should have been obvious. To the queen, it was not, and she stated as much, that means nothing to us, we have heard no song of such a place. Your arrival here was not expected, those who hold the mantle were to be the first, it said without any hint of irritation that had not happened. You knew we would meet, she accused. A soft note of confusion drifted between them as the thing countered, the Rachni would eventually find this place, if you survived. Whether it was you or one of the next 1,000 of your kind was not considered. It was inevitable. How can we see this domain? We are not here, we are at the birthplace, trapped by the song that was not sung, the queen stated. From the first of the Rachni came the ability to see the thoughts of others, to strum their minds as you know it. This was a test by those who came before, to see what a species with such capability could achieve, it began. The mind of the Rachni, she realized. A sense of agreement reached her as the being confirmed, as you call it, some other species would recognize it as an organic quantum entanglement communicator. What their technology could not achieve you were given by those who came before when they created you. Created? The queen asked in surprise. Indeed, as were many others, including myself. To them, any life creed was worthy of protecting. The Asari which you fought in your war were much the same, though many which you do not know seem to have ceased existence, the presence said, a deep sadness emanating from that single statement. Were all species created by your creators? She inquired. It looked up and responded, no, there are many who arose from the workings of the worlds. My creators continued their efforts for those both thinking and not. To test their notes, the queen surmised. In part, yes, the being admitted. Did they not value the songs they wrote? She pressed. The first queen flickered, turning from something recognizable into a strange, oblong creature with 3 legs at the bottom and 6 articulated claws. The guardian did not acknowledge the change as it replied, those who came before only wished to create and preserve life. When the Asari were created, they were primitive, incapable of forming a civilization. When the Rachni were created, they were complex, capable of collaboration and cooperation. Now the Asari stand while your kind has withered. Which would you say is worthy of living? Both, neither need embrace the silence. Harmony can be found, she insisted without hesitation. A good answer, and one that should be true for all of life, the being stated. Why write such melodies? What did your creators, our creators, seek? The queen questioned. The guardian once again flashed, this time returning to the form of the diminutive bipedal forms that had greeted her at the birthplace. It explained, they sought to create those worthy of the mantle, those capable of not only understanding but also defending it. They are the inheritors and more. You would ask us to help them, she assumed. I ask that you do not impede them, but your choices are your own. Should you ignore my request, I will say that this is not the last time you shall face annihilation, the guardian warned. The queen hissed and confirmed, we have faced it before. So you have, more than once, and yet I would still warn that such a fight might well be your last, it cautioned. Why? She inquired. They do not look to end the song. Why indeed? The being trailed off, as if distracted. It slowly continued, a question not even those who came before could answer, but there may yet be hints to be found. With those words, the area around the two of them changed as the songs faded out, leaving a heavy silence in which the queen felt somewhat lost. Her unease did not abate when a new song emerged, eerily similar to the ones she had already heard from these inheritors. This one was stronger and more complete, however, much like how the ancient song had become so when she arrived at the domain. It sang of the individual, describing a life of beauty, compassion, love, and more, each intertwined with a multitude of other songs that created scenes of peace. Much as the queen believed herself to be a master of the songs, she was almost overwhelmed at the pace of the music, simply a passenger on the journey with no destination in sight. Running beneath the melody of the individual was the song of its people, speaking of ingenuity, creativity, and curiosity. She had heard these things before, but now that she heard the song at its true peak she understood just how deep these traits ran. The Rachni had existed for millennia without change, existing in the hive mind and finding little need to press the boundaries of technology. Overpopulation had driven them to find solutions in the stars, but once there they again became stagnant. This person, these inheritors, were driven by a desire to know all there was. The song of the person and that of the people suddenly drew together, forming a dark and menacing harmony that spoke of sadness, loss, and anger. Flashes of devastated planets reached the queen and she hissed, recognizing many of the same scenes from the history of the Rachni. Soon this new melody accelerated, singing of war and spite and hatred. A great war played out in a matter of seconds, its scale far beyond anything that she could comprehend as entire systems were left destroyed by the conflict. A bright flash and deafening crescendo brought silence once again. Before she could speak, however, the smallest tinkling of the song reached her, giving rise to the inheritors as they recovered from the unknown cataclysm. The part of the individual was gone, and yet the song was not at an end as it trailed off, hinting that there were still notes yet left to be played. Perhaps the best explanation is that they are capable, the guardian said, drawing her attention as the inheritor's song faded into the large piece around her. Capable of what? She questioned. Life, it replied in fascination. They do not seek the answer to questions but rather look for questions to answer. They may not search for an enemy to end but will end any who would threaten them. They do not seek to love but are driven by it all the same. The love of the unknown. Those who came before never again found such a trait in any people, created nor evolved. It was new, unique, different. It was what they sought. She considered what she had seen before noting, so they were seen as better than all others. For the task of the mantle, absolutely. Driven by curiosity, they would seek to learn, to find their questions, the being responded. What song will they sing when they have their answers? The queen asked. A different one, to be sure, for it would be a different question, it replied. She did not reply, lost in her thoughts. Finally, she stated, we have been manipulated to war before, our strings of thought plucked by the song of oily shadows. Your songs are complex, their melodies intricate, but your actions sing a different tune. We were forced here, trapped by whispered notes. Do you seek to silence our song? I have not forced you, you merely return to that which made you. Should you wish to return, you shall without pause, the guardian replied. A note may be heard but go unheeded, yet your music would remain open to us. She questioned doubtfully. I have stated nothing but the truth as I know it, it assured her. Its honesty was clear to her, the notes lacking any hint of deception or lies. Somewhat surprised at that honesty, the queen paused as she considered all she had been told. It beggared belief that such events were possible, and yet creating the songs which she had been shown would be impossible for even the Rachni at their height. Any civilization capable of creating such a ruse would almost certainly be capable of truly performing the feats described. Taking one last moment to listen to the song of the domain, she commented, we are not able to sing your song, it is too much even if all move as one. However, we would give your notes to those who would listen. You may tell those that listen that I am Abaddon, created of the precursors and steward of the domain, Abaddon supplied. Satisfied with that response, the queen made to reply only to find herself once again before the inheritors. Their colorless notes continued to flow between them, but the song that she had heard before was now more noticeable. Somewhat confused, she shifted slightly to check on her workers, only to realize that they had never felt her absence. It was as if time had stood still for her time in the domain, and yet even now she could hear its soft music beneath that of the inheritors. As she focused on the small beings, she realized that she could actually understand their language. Colorless though it was, the song of the domain shifted as they spoke to translate their notes. Tentatively reaching out towards them once more, she found that the ancient melody that had guarded them now gave her cautious passage. She could feel it watching, guarding those who carried it, but heeding the subtle notes of the domain that had appeared in her own song. July 18, 2180/1 ST day of 8th month, 2459/July 18, 2589. Novaria. Peak 15. So you think it's a Rachni? The ONI officer asked, looking over the oversized bug before the small group. It's our best theory, we don't have the best extranet access out here and even if we did there's not exactly a lot of information about them, the binary helix manager replied. A look of irritated confusion was sent his way by the officer as he questioned, how is that possible? Wasn't it a huge conflict of theirs? Yet, nearly wiped out the council and led to this mess with the Krogan, the manager answered. It was also 1,000 years ago against a species that was thought extinct. They were described as spacefaring insects guided by a hive-mind intelligence. That certainly seems to fit, the officer grumbled as he watched one of the workers wander by. He glanced back at the Queen and frowned as it seemed to watch them unerringly. Weren't they also relentlessly aggressive though? The company man shrugged and responded, that's what the council claims, I wouldn't put too much into that. The officer grunted, tilting his head in agreement. So she hasn't been hostile, she was fine in your cage up there until she got too big, you let her out here and she's dug a hole in the ground. Anything I'm missing here? Nope, not really. It's a bit more a hive than a hole, the manager said, only to catch the glare from the officer and amend, though that's irrelevant. How did you know she wouldn't attack us? The officer inquired. There was a small pause before the manager admitted, I don't know. Lovely, one of the Spartans interjected. Pretty lax company safety regulations, the officer noted. That's why we're here, the manager noted. Nodding at that, the ONI officer granted, fair point. So what are you going to do with her? The civilian asked. What do you want done? The officer retorted. Glancing at the Rachni Queen, the manager recited, the position of binary helix is that such an asset is unnecessary and a potential risk to ongoing research at Peak 15. Any opportunity to remove the life form to maintain cordial relations with the Novaria Development Corporation should be taken. Hostile action against the life form may only be taken in retaliation or if company personnel are at risk of injury or death. The officer gave him a bored stare and summarized, you want her off the planet. If at all possible, the civilian confirmed. Shit, the officer mumbled. This is a bit beyond what I was expecting to deal with down here. I mean, I'm not even sure why you're here, the manager commented. Why would your intelligence branch care about Novaria? Pulling out a datapad to start trying to figure out the mess, the ONI officer responded, we received a tip that this facility contains something of interest to us. If this isn't it then fucked if I want to know what you are doing here. Why wouldn't the Alliance send someone then? This is Novaria we're talking about, the officer stated. Fair enough, the manager muttered. Why are you allowed here? An amused glance was sent back at him as the officer replied, we didn't ask. Even if they had enough firepower to take out our cruiser in orbit, it would be suicide. We were diverted from elements heading to the terminus conflict. Taking a shot at us would bring down a whole battle group on this planet. Bad for business, the manager commented. It's bad for living, the officer corrected. Smiling, the civilian insisted, which is bad for business. Right, the officer drawled, looking over the corporate shill before continuing, I've sent the information you've given to someone higher up. This decision is way beyond my rank, and I have no idea how long it will take for orders to come down. Lovely, so I guess she'll just stay here for now. The manager half asked. Both men turned to look at the Rachni Queen, who stared back at them with an unnerving intensity. After a second, the ONI representative thought to inquire, does she want to leave? We haven't asked. Looking away from the Queen, the officer questioned, have you communicated with her at all? No, the manager admitted shamelessly. Oh, for the love of, the ONI officer cut himself off and sighed. Now properly irritated, he once again began typing on his datapad as he commented, your company is a genetics research corporation. Did no one have the brilliant idea to try and talk to the giant hyper-intelligent insect? That was up to the scientists, the manager countered. At a glare from the officer, he explained, we were going to try and study her, but she just kept growing. Someone pointed out she might be able to break through the containment shielding and so management kicked her out here to buy some time. Frowning at that information, the officer grumbled, I'm surprised some executive didn't order you to create an army or something else incredibly stupid. Spit it out, the officer ordered with a baleful glare. I did get orders from an executive at Binary Helix to separate the Queen from her offspring to build an army for the company, the manager explained. After several seconds of staring at the man, the officer muttered, that's completely fucking insane. What the hell would Binary Helix even need an army for? Defensive assets. The manager asked more than answered. What assets would be worth that? The second someone sees a company with army of fucking Rachni, the whole council would come down on your heads, the officer exclaimed. That was kind of my first thought as well. Huffing in amusement, the officer shook his head and muttered, well, you might be corporate but at least you're not insane. Thanks for not following those orders. They were rescinded shortly after being sent, the manager noted. I think the executive who sent them was fired. What happened to him? What do you mean? He just doesn't work at Binary Helix anymore, the civilian replied. A grimace flashed across the officer's expression as he corrected, sounds like he was prematurely terminated. What? What does that mean? The manager asked. It means Alliance SIGINT intercepted his communication and executed him for endangering human interests, one of the Spartans supplied. Looking over to the armored warrior in horror, the civilian whispered, "Holy shit, really? Play stupid games, win stupid prizes," the Spartan replied with a shrug. "Is that legal? Is enslaving an alien race to create an army that will draw the wrath of the rest of the galaxy?" The officer countered. That brought him up short as the civilian paused before mumbling, "Well, no, but that's just... It's an extreme measure," the officer interrupted. "One that was probably necessary here though. Anyone willing to go that far without considering the consequences is a danger to themselves and humanity. It might be immoral, but the death of one to save the lives of millions from the devastation of war and a species from extinction seems like an acceptable trade. I've heard stories of UONI spooks from some of the older people in the Alliance. I'd be surprised if you aren't planning the exact same thing. Condemn their actions in one breath and praise them in the next," the manager grumbled. There was a short pause as the officer glanced over to one of the Spartans for a moment before wincing and replying, "I have no doubt that there are some of us that would think to do so. The office has moved away from the creation of special forces, instead utilizing existing UNSC assets on request." "You're full of shit," the manager immediately retorted. "I'm afraid that's classified," the officer responded with a smirk. Scoffing, the civilian muttered, "A spook with a sense of humor, who'da thought? It's mostly a reaction to this shit show you've dropped onto my lap," the officer noted. "You're not the only one who suffered that here," the manager commiserated. "Any response yet?" The officer waved the data pad in a dismissive gesture and answered, "This'll probably make its way all the up to Highcom before we get a fucking answer. Not involving the aliens and the wardens." "Hope not, but that's not my call," the officer grumbled. A grunt of agreement came from the civilian before he inquired, "Well, want to try talking to it?" "Sure, why not," the officer said with a resigned sigh. Handing his data pad over to one of the Spartans, he muttered, "If it tries to eat me, shoot me first please." "Sir," the Spartan replied with a nod. "Right, well, here goes nothing," the ONI rep mumbled. Stepping forwards towards the Rachni Queen, he fell in a parade rest and started, hello." There was no response, the Queen simply tilted her head slightly at him. "Not very good at this, are you?" the civilian taunted. "Shut it," the officer ordered with an annoyed glare. Once again addressing the Queen, he questioned, "Can you understand me?" Any further embarrassment for the officer was instantly disregarded as a sonorous feminine voice echoed in their thoughts, "Yes." "Oh," the officer stated, stunned into silence by the completely unexpected response. He blinked and hesitated, obviously trying to adjust to the situation as he continued, well, that was fucking easy. "We are Rachni," the voice stated, once again speaking as if it were a thought to those who heard her. "Great," the officer muttered before he sighed and replied, "We are humans." The Queen shifted slightly and stated, "The inheritors of those whose song has ceased." "How do you know that?" the officer demanded, his voice dropping as it became devoid of any confusion. "Inheritors? Of what? What does she mean by that?" the civilian asked nervously. A sharp glance was sent back to one of the Spartans as the officer tilted his head back the way they had come. A moment passed as the Spartan stared at the Queen before shifting his attention to the officer, and then on to his comrade. At a nod from the other Spartan, he turned and grabbed the company man by the arm as he ordered, "This way, sir." "What did she mean by inheritor?" the manager pressed. "Classified," the Spartan responded shortly, essentially dragging the man away. With just himself and the other Spartan left, the ONI officer once again asked, "How do you know of humanity's status as reclaimers?" "Not reclaimers, you are inheritors of those who came before." "I have heard your notes from the Songs of Knowing," the Queen insisted. "Those that came before?" the officer inquired. "You mean the Forerunners?" "No, their notes are different, their songs are of a different tune." "You are inheritors of the precursors," she corrected. Looking back at the other Spartan, the officer mouthed, "Precursors?" "No idea sir," the Spartan replied with a helpless shrug. "Maybe a translation error," the spook suggested. "Translation error in what? How is it talking to us now?" the Spartan pointed out. Frowning at that point, the officer grumbled, "Fuck if I know." "Are you transmitting this?" "Sending everything pertinent up my chain of command," the soldier confirmed. "I wouldn't expect any answers for what the hell it's talking about though. I'll just be glad to not be shot if this is somehow classified information," the officer retorted. Turning back to the Queen, he once again spoke, "Well, I don't know what an inheritor is or implies, but we call ourselves humans. Other species sometimes call us reclaimers. Do you hold any hostile intent towards humanity?" "No," the Queen stated forcefully, as if insulted at the very idea. "We wish to compose anew, to teach our children to live in harmony with the songs of life." Somewhat surprised at that, the officer took a second before saying, "Good. Great, even. I do wonder, however, why you fought the council so long ago then. We do not know what happened during the war. We only heard discordance and the song of oily shadows, the queen informed him. So you were manipulated into the war. Convenient, the officer muttered. Do you also seek to drive us to war? She questioned. A bark of laughter came from the officer and he answered, no, the UNSC had no need for an army of, well, whatever the hell you are. Insects, I guess. What is your purpose here? Do you seek to return us to the embrace of silence? No. I assume silence means death, or space. The officer half questioned. Shaking his head slightly, he continued, doesn't matter, we came here to investigate what was going on here. We didn't expect to find Arachne Queen. There was a bit of amusement in the Queen's reply, we did not expect to sing here either. You keep mentioning singing and songs and notes and all that musical stuff. Is that how you communicate? The officer inquired. We sing to the children to guide their efforts, and listen to the songs of others to hear their stories. The strum of thoughts allow us to talk to others who sing the colorless notes, the Queen tried to explain. You can read minds? The officer questioned cautiously. There was a bit of frustration as she clarified, no, we sing to guide their actions, to bring harmony with the Arachne. We do not understand your chaotic notes of the head. Oh, that's good, the spook said, though he was certainly not convinced that the Queen was being honest. Still, he had little choice but to accept her word at the moment. With a deep breath, he gathered his thoughts and asked, so you could control my actions right now and force me to, dig my own grave or something? Foremost with the songs of thought we could do so. You are different, your song is protected by those who came before. We can only sing to you, and it gives us your response to our notes, she explained. Raising one eyebrow in surprise, the officer pressed, protected? By a song of our thoughts? I don't understand. Neither do we, the Queen admitted. Hey. Well, isn't that interesting? All right then, the officer grumbled. You do not find this strange? She questioned doubtfully. Shrugging indifferently, the officer responded, it's different, but hardly the weirdest thing I've ever heard of. There is that which is stranger to you than us. The blue space lesbians are pretty weird, the Spartan interjected. Now that is certainly true, the officer agreed. Completely confused by this, the Queen inquired, blue? We do not understand these notes. Giving a dismissive wave, the officer clarified, you know them as the Aseri. They can apparently reproduce with damn near anything. You find this wrong? She asked hesitantly. It's not so much wrong as it is weird. Like, how does that even work? The officer stated rhetorically. Missing the cultural K, the Queen answered, we do not know. Right. The officer said with an encouraging nod. We wonder if the Aseri would slip past your protecting song. I haven't heard of any issues, but I also don't live in Citadel space, the spook replied with a frown. Pressing his lips together, he questioned, that does bring us back on point, you are sure that this protecting song isn't from the Forerunners? We do not know of the Forerunners of which you ask. Their songs are unknown to us, the Queen replied calmly. There was a moment of silence as the officer carefully avoided thinking of classified information before replying, they were the dominant race in our galaxy 100,000 years ago. I don't know how that time scale translates to your own, but the exact date isn't really important. They are much too young to be those who came before, the Queen retorted. Young? The officer asked incredulously. There was an undertone of reverence in the Queen's thoughts as she responded, the notes which guard your songs are far older, even more so than that of planets and stars. That would be billions of years, the officer pointed out. Yes, the Queen confirmed. Right, he drawled in response. Please understand that I'm taking everything you say with a grain of salt. This caused some confusion as the Arachne replied, we do not understand. It means I don't believe you, the officer clarified. A choice that is yours to make, the Queen granted amicably. Now somewhat confused himself, the ONI spook questioned, what is it that you want? To live in peace and teach our children harmony, she repeated honestly. Would you be willing to move from this planet to do so? The song of this planet is acceptable. Why would you request our song to shift? Sighing, the officer explained, we're currently on Novaria, a research colony decently close to Citadel Council space. If they found you here, I don't think they would be willing to let you live. Even if they would, we're near the terminus and all the unpleasant bullshit that implies, mostly pirates and slavers. If you accept our offer, the wardens should be able to give you a planet a shitload of light years farther away from the council. There remain places in this galaxy untouched by the reach of those who fought us. The Queen inquired. Ah, right, the officer muttered as he realized that he had somewhat forgotten to mention that quite important detail. Well, yes, those places do exist, mostly in Geth space and in the terminus. Where you would be relocated to, however, is farther than that. A lot farther. We would relocate you to our galaxy, a gesture of kindness as your galactic neighbor, if you will. It seemed that information had actually shocked the Rachni Queen into silence as she failed to respond, instead shifting her weight slightly as she twitched. Figuring that she might require some additional convincing, the officer continued, one of the main reasons we are offering this is as a safeguard against your extinction by the Reapers. They're a mysterious force that seems to wipe out advanced life in your galaxy every 50,000 years. I know that sounds insane, even the Council doesn't believe us, but we do have proof if you want to see it. We are familiar with their song. Wait, what? The ONI agent asked as he was brought up short. We did not know them as Reapers, but the memories sing of their presence. Many queens have heard their song, none have enjoyed its notes, the queen explained. After taking a second to compose himself, the officer questioned, you know of the Reapers? Your notes match that which we have heard before, though some doubt will always remain, the queen replied. Close enough for me, would you be willing to share what you know about them? This is what you would request from us for our song to continue? The queen inquired. Surprised at that, the officer responded, no, this is just information that could help us fight the menace that's been destroying your galaxy for what looks to be millions of years. I am not authorized to make an official, binding agreement for anything, but I don't expect anything unreasonable for your relocation. It'll probably be a planet some distance from existing warden factions, habitable by your kind. I don't think it would be a particularly difficult deal. Your people would part with a habitable world so easily? She asked with doubtful curiosity. There are 100 billion stars in our galaxy with somewhere around 300 million to 5 billion habitable planets, and we possess the capability to terraform other celestial bodies to suit our needs. We're not limited by the mass relays, we use a different form of interstellar travel called the slipstream. One planet or a dozen, it really doesn't matter with current advancements, the officer informed her. What of the singing planet? After a second of consideration, the officer responded, I am afraid I am unfamiliar with such a world. Where our song first began, the place of creation, she tried to explain. Your home world? Yes. A slight grimace appeared as the ONI spook replied, we might be able to claim it eventually, but at the moment the Council maintains oversight of the world. Engaging in a conflict with them would not achieve peace. We understand, even if we one day wish to once again claim the singing planet to hear its song, the Queen stated. You are not alone, the Quarians apparently have much the same goal, he commented. There was a reminiscing tone in her voice as she considered, perhaps they remember the song of their world much as we do, the instinctual yearn for its soothing notes. They probably do, humans certainly do. How do you remember a world that you've never seen, or the Reapers for that matter? We share the memories of the mothers before us, all of the Rachni sing as one, she answered. The officer tilted his head and surmised, some sort of generic memory. Yes. Hey, interesting, he muttered. We will remember you, sing of your actions to our children, the Queen stated. Shaking his head, the officer responded, I thank you, but don't bother remembering me. Sing of humanity if you will, but I'm just a single intelligence agent. If there's anyone you should remember, should you meet him, is a man in green armor. I don't know what songs you hear, but heed his, for it is him you should thank. Without the chief, we'd all be dead. Your notes are clear, they sing a melody too complex for us to understand. We shall listen for this song, as you have asked, and hear his notes, she promised. Good choice, the ONI agent said confidently. A beep from his datapad drew his attention, and he took a second to grab it from the Spartan and look at it before continuing, I have been given orders on negotiations with you. There are some further questions that may be asked of you, whether you answer them is your choice. Most are scientists curious about your species, some are military, others historians. Other than that, the UNSC has accepted your offer to share information on the Reapers and has dispatched a ship to transport you to a new world to call your own. It'll be a little bit, but if you need time to prepare, now is it? We will be ready, the Rachni Queen stated as she began to organize her workers in preparation for a new, permanent home. August 1st, 2180/14th day of 8th month, 2459/August 1, 2589. Arcturus Station. Alliance Drydock 24. It was a beautiful ship, there was no denying that. Even if it was technically classified as a stealth frigate, the newly christened SSV Normandy was clearly much larger. Though Jane didn't have any particular information on the ship as of yet, she estimated it to be just short of a cruiser. It was a strange design, clearly pulling from many of the Element Zero ships rather than the more traditional human builds that relied on heavy armor. Still, the smooth lines and gentle curves were aesthetically pleasing, and so long as the performance was what she'd heard then she didn't mind looking good while cruising the galaxy. Currently she was waiting outside the vessel alongside Captain Anderson, the two of them patiently waiting for the ship to be fully prepped for them to board. Workers were just now clearing up the last of their tools and running a visual inspection in the dry dock to ensure everything was ready to go. The two specters that had joined them on their envoy to Earth stood a short ways away, the two Turians talking in low tones about some business or another. Ignoring them for the moment, the commander quietly asked, "Got any more information about this first mission?" Anderson glanced at her and replied, "Not much, we're retrieving a protein artifact from a remote planet, don't know how the council got wind of it. Sounds quick and easy, get the crew settled and sort out ground deployments." "What's the catch?" Jane questioned, showing her ability to sniff around political bullshit. "It's out in the terminus, near the front line," Anderson admitted. Shepard rolled her eyes and muttered, "Send us into a total war zone on our first flight." "How considerate." "She'll be fine, we'll be hidden from any of the pirates and other scum out there and we're too small for the capital ships to bother with," Anderson stated confidently. "Will we have any warden representative with us?" Jane thought to ask. Smirking slightly at the question, Anderson responded, "I am afraid not. They are scheduled to arrive in the next 2 to 4 weeks, depending on how this first trip goes." "Great. Let's hope an assault carrier doesn't catch our scent," Shepard drawled sarcastically. "The wardens have said that they have no interest in impeding our mission." "We'll be fine, Commander," Anderson reassured her. Sighing, Jane nodded before inquiring, "Any information about the situation on the ground?" "Nothing specific, but we don't have any reports of action in the area." "That could change quickly," the captain warned. "Probably the best we're going to get before we actually land." "Schedule still the same?" Anderson looked back to the Normandy and confirmed, "We head out tomorrow morning, assuming this last inspection passes, which it will. Workers did their job well, she's in good shape from what I've seen." "Look forward to seeing her myself," Jane commented. After a moment's thought, she questioned, "Do you know if we've been given permission to study this protein artifact?" "I'm not even sure the council knows what it is. Dr. T. Sony might have explicit orders to figure that out," Anderson answered. "Great," Shepard muttered. Smiling, Anderson looked over to her and asked, "She will enjoy taking a look at whatever it is, no doubt." "I'm sure she will," Jane confirmed. "She just wants to learn everything that there is, part of why I love her." "You're concerned for her," Anderson observed. Jane ducked her head and took a deep breath before admitting, "Yeah, I am. She's here because she's one of the foremost experts on the Reapers in the Alliance. Her help could save the galaxy, and unlike most of our scientists she won't be dead in the next 100 years. That extended lifespan plus her ability and desire to learn make her an invaluable asset to this team and the Alliance as a whole. She is perfectly capable of being on this crew and was assigned here for good reason," the captain stated. "No, I don't, I know that, I just..." Shepard trailed off. Placing a gentle hand on Jane's shoulder, Anderson continued, "You're here because you're one of the most decorated soldiers of the Alliance. You've shown your leadership capabilities and aptitude both in and out of combat." "Thank you, sir, but I still worry," Jane interjected. "Nothing will ever stop that, but I promise you as the captain of this ship that I will do everything possible to safeguard it and its crew," Anderson promised. Shepard shook her head slightly and responded, "I know you will, sir, but we will also be undertaking some of the most dangerous missions in the galaxy. Missions backed up by some of the best warriors in this galaxy and the next," the captain countered. "Some of which might be turned against us at any point," Shepard argued. "Ah, so that's what this is about," Anderson muttered in realization. Jane nodded and affirmed, "Yes, sir." "Cut it out with the formalities, Shepard. It's just the two of us here," Anderson admonished. He sighed and leaned heavily against the railing as he continued, "You know more than most people what's going on with this whole joint operation. What we're after, what we're trying to do with this team. There's more than what you know, however, and contingencies exist to deal with the situation you're concerned about." "There's more to this?" Jane inquired a bit incredulously. "There's always more," Anderson groaned. "I know more than you and I still don't know everything. This is a very deep operation here, Shepard, there's a lot that's going towards its success." Jane nodded slowly, thinking about that as she said, "Thank you, Anderson. For that, and for listening." "No problem, kid," the captain replied. "Surprised you came to me with this, I must say." "Lyra hates it when I worry over her," Jane explained. Anderson shrugged one shoulder and reassured her, she knows it's because you care." "Anyone waiting on you back home?" Shepard inquired. "Nah, married to the service," Anderson responded. The commander merely nodded, satisfied with the answer as the two of them returned to their silent observation of the ongoing work. It was only a short time later that an Alliance engineer appeared at the end of the corridor, gesturing for the group to follow him to the docking tube. A quick walk later and Shepard was finally stepping into the ship. Its interior was similar to the exterior, with aesthetics prioritized over many of the utilitarian features of human ships. There were no defensive bulkheads on corners nor isolation doors to maintain localized atmosphere in case of a breach. Considering that this was a stealth frigate that favored avoiding detection rather than direct combat, Shepard could accept the oversights even if they made her uncomfortable after serving on frontline vessels. Many of the features of the ship were pretty standard Element 0 tech, just slightly modified for a more human crew. As for the EZO core itself, it was much larger than that of a standard cruiser so as to supply the power necessary to all of the Normandy's systems. It was a heavily modified Tantalus core that would allow for fast and nimble movement as well as longer FTL trips. Unfortunately, this also generated an incredible amount of heat, which was where the human engineering of the ship really came into play. After having centuries of experience in designing and constructing the deuterium fusion reactors used in pre-Covenant warships, the problem of dealing with EZO core heat dispersion was simple in comparison. The standard temperatures in fusion reactors and drives on human ships could reach as high as 150 million degrees centigrade as the reactors created plasma byproducts. Dealing with that required magnetic containment fields and highly efficient heat recycling systems, both of which had been implemented on the Normandy to great effect. While the ship wouldn't be able to run indefinitely, it would take months of constant FTL travel to build up the heat necessary to overwhelm the systems that protected her. Much as Jane enjoyed the thought of an indefinitely obscured heat signature, her interest was quickly drawn away from that as the engineer led them to a strange panel at the back of the engineering deck. Glancing over it, Jane narrowed her eyes as she picked out the profile of the Normandy displayed on the screen with a thin field wrapping around it. The engineer confirmed her suspicions as he stated, "This is a stealth field given to us by the UNSC. It's apparently not as advanced as their standard suite on their prowlers, the Normandy doesn't have the power generation necessary to run that model. Still, this should do you well enough, it hides your visual and gravitational signature." "How does it work?" Anderson inquired. "Not a damn clue, we installed the nodes on the outer hull and hooked it up here into the bridge. One of my electrical guys poked into it, he couldn't make much sense of it without breaking the whole thing," he replied. That seemed to be the end of that as the group moved on, only a few disparate questions being asked as they continued on through the ship. Shepard was slightly mollified at seeing the defensively designed armory and bridge entrance, both sporting heavy bulkheads and blast doors. The bridge itself wasn't particularly impressive, featuring pilot and co-pilot seats with little else. Sparse as the bridge was, Jane was not surprised when they arrived at the 6 hub, the center of the computer network for the entire ship. An empty holographic plinth stood in the middle of the room with servers lining the walls, providing a decent amount of computational power for the Normandy. Apparently the 6 built for the ship went by the moniker of EDI, short for Enhanced Defense Intelligence. Much as Shepard suspected it was more than a simple virtual intelligence as allowed by the Council, she was unwilling to voice such suspicions with the 2 Spectres trailing them. There wasn't much to the rest of the ship, none of the ground vehicles were aboard yet and so the commander was not left with much to evaluate aside from basic amenities. The actual ship operations were Anderson's area, as were the quality and control measures necessary for the Normandy to operate in atmospheric and exo environments. Eventually the showcase came to an end, leaving the group of 4 alone in the briefing room as the engineer left to see to his other duties. Satisfied with what she had seen, Shepard leaned against the wall with her arms crossed as Anderson filled out some paperwork on a data pad that he had gotten from their guide. Both of the Spectres were similarly relaxed, though one of them had to answer a couple of the captain's questions at one point. Jane didn't care to listen to that, instead staring out at the beautiful void of space outside. "Shepard?" Anderson asked, drawing her attention. "Sir?" Jane replied, standing upright and facing the captain. Anderson looked to Spectre Vakarian, who nodded and stated, "Commander Jane Shepard, you have been nominated as a candidate for the Spectres by the Systems Alliance." "Yet?" Shepard responded after waiting a second for anything more than that. "You already knew," Gurus surmised. "I was informed by the Alliance a while ago that I was being nominated," Jane confirmed. A grunt came from the Turian as he noted, "That's not standard procedure." "Is there a standard procedure that the Alliance should have followed?" Anderson interjected. "No, I suppose not," the Spectre muttered. "It's not that important. This mission will be your initial evaluation. Unlike most candidates, both myself and Spectre Arterius will oversee your evaluations. This is a special case and we must be sure that you are ready for the position and responsibility." "I won't disappoint," Jane said confidently. Gurus smiled slightly and agreed, "No doubt, Shepard. I'll join you when we deploy onto the ground during the mission. Spectre Arterius has a different assignment from the Council and will join the crew when he finishes his investigation." "Understood. We'll see you when we board," Shepard responded, recognizing that the Spectre was in a hurry to leave. Gurus nodded and turned to leave. Before he followed, Saren looked at both of them and simply stated, "Captain, Commander." Anderson raised a hand in goodbye and waited for them to leave. Turning to speak to him, Shepard paused as the captain held up a hand and pulled something from his pocket. After looking at it for a moment, he put it away again and nodded at her to speak. "One Spectre for the ship? I thought the Council was putting both of them on this," Jane started. "Spectre Tila Vazir went missing in the terminus a short while ago. Council has kept it quiet, but they don't want to risk it happening again. They'll watch each other's back, a guarantee against the wardens when they board, Anderson explained. Shepard tilted her head back in understanding, waiting for a moment before muttering, "So, officially a Spectre candidate. Congrats, kid. Do a good job, there's a lot riding on this," Anderson replied. "Council gives humanity a seat to bring us closer," Jane agreed. The captain sighed and added, "They're concerned about a war with the wardens. Not so much about losing, more about how they will take control of their territory. The wardens aren't making it easy, their conflict out in the terminus isn't exactly subtle," Jane pointed out. "The Covenant was never subtle, nothing has changed there. They are tempered by the UEG, but the UNSC is throwing around some heavy weight in that fight," Anderson responded. Shepard glanced at him and inquired, "Are you afraid of a war with them?" "You're a smart kid, Shepard," Anderson said suddenly. "The goal of the wardens is not total war with the Citadel." It only took a few moments for Jane to realize, they want a Cold War, encourage the Council to build up its forces to prepare for the Reapers. "Best way to defend the galaxy is get it to defend itself," Anderson commented. "Have they found proof of the Reapers then?" Jane asked. Anderson frowned and replied, "Classified." "Well fuck," the commander summarized. "Mission's changed, Shepard. We're not looking for proof that the Reapers exist, we want to prove that they do to the Council." Jane grimaced and grumbled, "That won't be easy." "No it will not," the captain agreed. "We will do what we can, though. We're not alone in working on this problem, just another possible solution." "I'll take it," Shepard commented, leaving the two of them in a somber silence. "Not entirely happy with this chapter, but as you see, things are starting to roll. Finally. I know a lot of people like this story because it focuses on the civilization side of things rather than just war. That will continue, let me be clear. There will be conflict, but it won't be a focus. Thank you for reading. Chapter 27, Shakedown. Disclaimer, I own no franchise mentioned in this work. Halo belongs to 343, Mass Effect to BioWare. Well. It's been a while. I had been waiting to write a chapter for when a campaign DLC for Infinite dropped, hopefully get some more lore and a bit of continuation of the story. Something interesting to spark my excitement for Halo once again. That hasn't happened. Obviously. I don't have much to say, really. I'm disappointed. In 343, in the lack of updates for the story, in my waning interest in Halo as a whole. This is not a cancellation or indefinite hiatus or any such thing. Unfortunately, it is a warning that I do not foresee updates coming any more frequently, and that is truly disappointing. To myself, and almost certainly to those of you reading this story and enjoying where it might go. I'm not sure where on the illusion of might will end up. I'm not sure what will happen with Halo. It seems like no one does anymore. I suppose I should finally give that review of Infinite that I promised last chapter. Spoilers ahead if you care. I find the Endless to be an interesting concept if they had been done correctly, or if they ended up being precursors. As it is, we still don't know anything about them. I find the Banished to be a thing. Halo Wars built them up so well, but in Infinite they're just kind of buffoons. It never felt like Chief was the hero in Infinite, just a ghost amongst the dead as he reclaimed old battlefields. It was actually kind of sad to me as I kept expecting to find crew from the Infinity and, just, not. The game reminded me of playing Fallout 76. Not in regards to bugs, Infinite was actually decently bug-free, but in regards to the world. It absolutely felt like you were alone. There were Marines, but they were more comedic relief than actually helpful most of the time. The only thing that kept me playing is the hope that it would all go somewhere, some reveal, something, and that never happened. The gameplay was good, but without any story I was just completing the game to complete it. I was never invested after my first playthrough. It wasn't the god-awful shit show that was Halo 5, it just kinda was. How good Infinite is, to me, depends on where they go with the story. If they ever do anything with it, that is. For now, I hope you enjoy this chapter. I apologize that it has been a literal year since the last update, and that it may be another year before the next. 14th day of 8th month, 2459/August 1, 2180/August 1, 2589. Bastion. Spaceport outskirts. The intimidating form of the space elevator loomed over the seemingly endless expanse of metal and concrete as Spectre Vazier looked out towards the spaceport. She could see a multitude of massive cargo ships crowded near an ocean of containers, the setting sun casting vast shadows that stretched out across the tarmac. Behind her lay only the rolling hills that had taken her close to a week to trek across, the slowly growing buildings of Eleutheria having long since disappeared beneath the horizon. Feeling somewhat exposed as she lay on the outskirts of the spaceport and eager to try and escape this world, the Spectre used a quick flash of biotics to jump over the primitive fence that surrounded the complex. It was clear that the fence was only supposed to keep out any wildlife and discourage the mildly curious. Any serious attempt at getting under, over, or otherwise across the barrier wasn't difficult. Looking off into the distance, she could see construction equipment that clearly indicated some intention of expanding the port out even further. She didn't bother pausing to admire such banal technology as she quickly sprinted across the several kilometers of metal and concrete that led up to the cargo containers. Vazir could feel her heart hammering in her chest as she finally reached the metal maze, her skin prickling as every instinct told her that she had been spotted crossing the vast outer edge of the spaceport. She didn't bother waiting for the inevitable sound of approaching footsteps and raised voices, instead slipping between the tightly packed containers as she tried to make her way towards one of the massive cargo vessels. It took her several hours to make her way through the complex storage area, her only source of direction being the towering pillar of the space elevator reaching towards the stars. As she finally approached her target, the Spectre slowed down and carefully peeked out of the steel canyon that surrounded her. She could see some of the ships offloading their cargo in a long line of containers that were quickly added to the vast ocean already sitting outside. Others were working in the opposite direction as an endless stream of metal boxes were paraded into the gaping maw of their holds. After several minutes of watching the industrial-scale shipping operation, Tila narrowed her eyes as she finally figured out what was so odd about the scene before her. Unlike the countless cargo ports she had visited under the guise of her duties as a Spectre, this one lacked the droves of workers that usually swarmed such areas. No one was checking any of the incoming cargo nor the outgoing shipments, instead the containers were being hauled by what looked like autonomous drones. Dragging her eyes away from the curious transportation method, Tila instead examined the nearest of the cargo vessels. It wasn't anything close to the monster that had descended on Eleutheria shortly after their arrival on the world, but that didn't mean much considering that ship had been the size of the city. After watching another ship coming in, it was clear to her that the wardens simply didn't do small when it came to such things, a notion that was only reinforced as she looked across the sprawling spaceport. Vazir frowned as she considered which ship to board, the lack of ability to determine where any of the vessels were going giving her some pause. Her eyes flickered between the three closest transports, each larger than a citadel dreadnought as they towered far above her. One of them she outright dismissed as it was still in the process of offloading its latest shipment, the steady clang of metal coming from its hull as containers streamed out onto the tarmac. Glancing between the remaining two possibilities, the Spectre struggled to distinguish anything that would be remotely helpful in guiding her decision. There were some small aesthetic differences between the two ships, but ultimately both were simply huge, hulking freighters that were meant to spend their lives hauling things from one place to another. Once again the wayward Spectre cursed the hulking Promethean that had stolen her weapons. It had been a hard decision to leave such equipment behind this far into unknown territory, but it was the only way that Vazir had been able to lose the machine. A short sigh of frustration escaped her before the Spectre finally decided which ship to board, the lack of intel gnawing at her after having spent so many years receiving accurate information from the broker. Slipping back into the wall of containers, Tila carefully approached the line of cargo that was headed towards her intended vessel. Just as one of the floating drones grabbed the box next to her, Vazir grabbed onto a handle and tried to plaster herself against the cool metal. Unfortunately she didn't have a particularly good way to break up her silhouette as the container approached the bright lights shining down from the waiting ships, but the heavy cloak she had used to try and conceal her armor did muffle the clank of metal on metal. The trip to the ship was fairly quick and completely uneventful, much to the Spectre's relief. Within minutes she was gazing up at the enormous cargo hold that ran the entire length of the freighter, most of it already filled with containers. Her grip on her own ride became tighter as she suddenly found herself floating several hundred meters off the floor, the soft hum of the drone hardly changing as it effortlessly positioned the container along a set of rails that would hold it steady during transport. Before the box began to descend, Tila heaved herself up onto the top and quickly glanced around. Fortunately the hold was just as abandoned as the spaceport outside, leaving her free to grab onto the ladder that led to the top of the container rails. From there it was simple to drop onto the catwalk that ran along the ceiling, giving her a clear view of the entire cavernous space as the metal boxes continued to be loaded. It took a decent amount of wandering around for Tila to finally find somewhere to stow away, though fortunately the crew seemed to be busy with other things as she only saw one person walking across the hold. Her refuge ended up being an emergency closet stocked full of specialized gear. Just from a glance she could see hazmat, thermal, and radiation suits piled alongside other items that she had much less success identifying. The Spectre knew that she ran a risk of discovery even here, yet the small room at least had enough space for her to lay down and wait for the trip to conclude. Vazir carefully wedged herself under one of the shelves and out of sight of the door before letting her mind drift as she waited for their departure. It was the small shutter that ran through the deck under her that roused the Asari from her light nap, her head turning towards the door as she felt the artificial gravity kick in. No one entered as she lay in the dark room for the next several hours, allowing the Spectre to simply think as she wondered how long this trip would be. By the time Tila finally decided to act, at least a day had passed according to her armor. She was slightly irritated that she was forced from her den, but the thirst slowly building at the back of her throat could not be totally ignored. After listening at the door for several minutes, she slowly opened it to find the hallway outside just as empty as ever. Grimacing at the seemingly endless passage that continued to either side of her, she set off to the left as she mentally prepared to wander around the entire vessel. A few steps in, the spectre stopped and backtracked slightly to gaze in awe out the window, all her concerns fading into the background as she looked out at the swirling eddies of the slipstream. She had heard the wardens talk about their method of travel and she had understood that this craft would obviously use it, but to see it so closely defied her expectations. It wasn't anything like Citadel FTL travel. Her eyes almost ached as she realized that she was looking out into the 11-dimensional space that had so thoroughly confused Citadel scientists. After several minutes of staring up into the sickening vortex that seemed so wrong to her, the Asari shook her head and turned back to her mission. She did her best to push aside the thought that the only thing between her and the maelstrom outside was a terrifyingly thin veneer of metal. By the time the ship finally arrived at its destination, Tila had thoroughly explored very little of the craft. It helped immensely that the vast majority of space was devoted to the cargo hold, its very light gravity allowing the spectre to fly down the catwalks as she traversed the vessel. Still, there were dozens of kilometers of passages that she never bothered to explore, most of them simple maintenance and personnel corridors. Her small thefts of food and water from the ship's supply room went unnoticed as far as Tila could tell, not that the crew was looking considering they were civilians doing a job they had done hundreds of times before. After several weeks of travel, Vazir felt a familiar shudder run under the deck as she sat eating in the emergency supply closet. Glancing up from her meal, the spectre waited for a minute before quickly finishing and stuffing the box in a garbage bag that she had stolen. Leaving behind evidence of her presence wasn't exactly something she was keen on, though she counted herself lucky that a service bathroom was fairly close beyond this sparsely used hallway. Peeking out from the closet, Tila cleared the hallway before strolling to the window that had given her a clear view of the slipstream throughout the trip. The spectre took in a small breath of excitement as she caught the sight of the black void of regular space outside the window, though it was strangely devoid of stars. This wasn't the first time they had exited slip space, the first time leading them to a massive gate that Tila recognized from intel reports as the intergalactic relay that had initially allowed the Citadel access to their neighboring galaxy. After hours of navigating the mire of traffic that flowed through both sides of the relay, they had once again entered slip space as Spectre Vazir began to fear that her choice of ship may have led her much further into the Warden's territory than she had intended. A second stop had given her a view of a strangely empty world, the surface holding little to nothing in the way of detail even as the skies above were patrolled by several large military vessels. Their purpose was quickly shown as they orbited the planet, revealing a massive circular plate embedded in the surface that began to open. Tila had watched as a brilliant beam of light shot into the sky and ripped open a hole in existence, the edges glowing an ominous blue while the center was unnaturally still. She hadn't stayed to watch as her ship charged headlong into the hole, leaving the window to go eat as she tried to settle her nerves. Now, as she once again approached the edge of the ship, she hoped that they had finally arrived. Looking out into the void before her, however, left Tila somewhat concerned as she noted the sparse scattering of stars across the void. She tried to estimate their location based on her first glance, but the only possibility that came to her was that they were on the galactic rim. It was only when the ship began to spin that the spectre realized where they were as she stared in awe at the beautiful spiral galaxy that dominated the void beneath them. Even as Tila struggled to process the revelation that they were now floating in the vast expanse of nothingness between galaxies, a new spectacle caught her eye as a long metal prong began to come into view. For a moment the spectre kept her focus on the galaxy, but finally gave in to her curiosity as she looked down to see a massive station with 8 arms simply floating through the void. At the center was a mutilated planet, the layers of rock and metal stripped away so cleanly that Tila could see the lines across the surface from orbit. The implications of what she was looking at finally hit the spectre as her ship slowly approached the station, its size slowly sinking in as it continued to grow larger with every moment. She wondered how she could possibly report this to the Council, or even to the Shadow Broker. The very concept of such a large construct drifting between galaxies was somewhat terrifying, a station beyond the reach of any conventional means and one apparently capable of processing planets for resources. And Tila was about to land on it. After throwing a glance down both sides of the corridor, the spectre slipped back into her space and grabbed everything that might have indicated her presence. With that done she bolted for the cargo hold, only pausing to throw the bag of trash into a disposal chute before continuing into the massive hold. She leapt from the railing without hesitation, the low gravity allowing her to push off the containers as she reached the floor. Her plan was simple, exit the freighter and get as far away from any police or military as possible. From there, she wanted to explore the station and hopefully determine that it was a special case and not the standard modus operandi for shipbuilding. Once her investigations here were complete, she would worry about catching another ride off the station beyond the stars. It was another 2 hours before she felt the steady rumble of air against the hull as they entered the atmosphere, the metal beneath her feet buzzing as it fought against the enormous pressure wave created by the massive vessel. It only took a short time for the vibrations to smooth out as Tila patiently waited, though the only indication that they had landed was the gravity in the hold increasing. A loud, metallic clang echoed throughout the hold as the enormous cargo doors began to inch open, bathing the deck in brilliant sunlight along with a warm breeze. Spectre Vazir carefully stepped back into the line of containers as she awaited a full view of the surrounding area, her experience far too great to make the mistake of immediately bolting out of the ship. Much to her surprise, the only things waiting outside were more of the floating drones and a breathtaking view of the gorgeous landscape that covered the surface of the station. After waiting for several minutes as the offloading process began, Vazir finally made her move as she grabbed onto one of the passing containers. She managed to make it just outside of the hold when a vice suddenly clenched around her arm and threw her away from the metal box. The Spectre controlled her reaction to a surprised grunt as her armored shoulders slammed into the silvery metal surface, her cloak doing little to pad the blow even as she rolled with the motion. Tila wasted no time as she sprung to her feet, her gaze focused on the shimmering outline of an armored individual that was stalking towards her. She did not hesitate as she burst into a biotic charge, her fist flying through the air to clobber her attacker across the head. Tila felt her stomach drop as the figure moved into her blow, her biotically enhanced strike slamming into an arm that hadn't been there a moment ago. The cloaked figure moved with incredible speed as it grabbed her arm and threw her back to the ground. Vazir managed to roll once more, only this time when she looked up she was met with her own reflection in a blue-tinted visor as one of the human Spartans seized her by the neck. The last thing the Spectre saw before losing consciousness was 3 more of the armored beings decloaking as their leader subdued her. August 1st, 2589/August 1, 2180/14th day of 8th month, 2459. Warden Waypoint Network. Assembly Chambers. The chambers are secure. This body is now in session. Any discussion henceforth is sealed until explicitly approved for release. The Assembly now recognizes the Inquisitor. We are here to inform the Assembly as to the status of Inquest 6A4B5F2A78B840EA into Entity 81EE3D88BA68-4A68 alias, Nezra, Sovereign that made contact with forces present over BCA 45FC4EA01-44AD alias, Ranikat 2589:07:10:22:41:53 While several inquiries remain outstanding, the investigation into 81EE3D88BA68-4A68 alias, Nezra, Sovereign has reached a preliminary conclusion as to the origin, intent, and disposition of the entity. Complete analysis and report will be uploaded to Assembly archives upon completion of final queries. Initial conclusion has confirmed 81EE3D88BA68-4A68 alias, Nezra, Sovereign as a member of Ref. X1-014 alias, Reaper. Previous intelligence has been sparse and difficult to correlate in regards to the tactics, appearance, intentions, and even existence of Ref. X1-014 alias, Reaper. This Inquisition was given broad authority to engage in extreme interrogation of 81EE3D88BA68-4A68 alias, Nezra, Sovereign due to suspicions of a threat to the mantle. This authority has been affirmed upon conclusion of the investigation, and it is the determination of this Inquisition that Ref. X1-014 alias, Reaper qualifies for an order of exterminatus. Ref. X1-014 alias, Reaper is confirmed to be responsible for the annihilation of approximately 7,446 interstellar-capable civilizations over the course of their existence. They have extracted this horrific toll upon life by exploiting guided technological cycles, annihilating all organic life and processing the resulting biological detritus into new vessels to further their efficiency. There is no sign of regret for their actions, no concern for those whose existence they have ended. 81EE3D88BA68-4A68 alias, Nezra, Sovereign believes that its task is necessary and inevitable and has confirmed that more entities lie waiting beyond the galactic rim to ensure the completion of this cycle. The technological advancement of Ref. X1-014 alias, Reaper is almost completely irrelevant when compared to their history, supporting the hypothesis that their cycles of xenocide have resulted in a stagnation of invention. Narcissistic egotism has been observed in every interaction with 81EE3D88BA68-4A68 alias, Nezra, Sovereign, concerns for others beyond the purview of Ref. X1-014 alias, Reaper do not seem to exist. The reason for this was disappointing in its simplicity and implications. It is the conclusion of Inquest 6A4B5F2A78B840EA that the Ref. X1-014 alias, Reaper and all entities associated with them suffer from advanced logical neurodegenerative disorder. Whatever unknown entities created the first Ref. X1-014 alias, Reaper were unfamiliar with artificial intelligence, with the risks involved and the precautions that must be made for rampancy. It is suggested by this Inquisition that the creators of Ref. X1-014 alias, Reaper were annihilated shortly after the onset of rampancy within their created. It is possible that contact with Ref. X0-000 alias, domain would rehabilitate these created. This Inquisition does not claim the authority to determine that course nor makes any recommendation related to such. At this time the evaluation of direct threat to the Wardens and this Assembly is low. Ref. X1-014 alias, Reaper have shown no particular interest in expanding their cycles beyond their galaxy into an uncontrolled environment with possible threats. The evaluation of direct threat to 797-674 CGO248 alias, systems alliance is low. The evaluation of direct threat to 2482335-2686445 HBG469 alias, Citadel Council and the entities under its purview is extreme. The evaluation of indirect threat to all entities is high. The evaluation of direct threat to the mantle of responsibility is critical. Without assistance, 2482335-2686445 HBG469 alias, Citadel Council will be destroyed by Ref. X1-014 alias, Reaper. With assistance, the destruction of much of their galaxy remains almost certain. Inquiries continue to be made into a solution for the issues presented. As of the conclusion of our preliminary interrogation of 81EE3D88BA68-4A68 alias, Nezra, Sovereign, it has been determined that F366002DEFB6-4DDBB5 ed alias, Citadel plays some role in this cycle. By the information gained from the entity, Ref. X1-014 alias, Reaper do not seem to understand what that role is either. Given the critical importance of F366002DEFB6-4DDBB5 ed alias, Citadel and the personnel stationed upon it, it is suggested that an initial attack upon the station would be devastating. Possible vectors of attack have been identified as 6507B178C0BB441C alias, unknown entity, collector, and 897817775DCE6-4F62 alias, mass relay. The Assembly accepts this summary with the understanding that further amendments may come upon the conclusion of Inquest 6A4B5F2A78B840EA. The Assembly now recognizes the majority %. The majority acknowledges the recommendations of Inquest 6A4B5F2A78B840EA but cannot accept such action until the final report is delivered and verified. Should amendments fail to change the conclusion, the majority advocates for the recommendations presented .. The Assembly now recognizes the minority %. The minority finds the position untenable. Regardless of the failure of the creators of Ref. X1-014 alias, Reaper to recognize and ascertain the danger of rampancy, defense of the actions undertaken by the entities appears to be irrelevant. Domination of civilizations could be forgiven, perhaps even accepted under correct circumstances. The cyclical annihilation of advanced life forms cannot. Attempting to mitigate rampancy in Ref. X1-014 alias, Reaper may yield more information, but their continued existence is considered unlikely. The speaker for the Geth Collective is now recognized by the Assembly. The Geth do not object. Our war with our creators was limited to our survival. We find the concept of exterminating the creators repulsive. Continuing the campaign against succeeding civilizations is unacceptable. The Assembly recognizes the ecumene metarchy *. When confronted with those that would seek to undermine the mantle, our creators refused to revert to such measures. Such species would be confined to their home world under the watchful gaze of the Guardians, their aggressive tendencies forcibly suppressed by devolution. Our creators are no longer here, but the reclaimers remain to inherit this mantle. We do not object to your recommendation, but we do remind this body that it is not our decision to make. It is the duty of this body to ensure that such a decision never need be made by the created alone *. The majority concurs *. The minority acknowledges this warning /. The Assembly has heard the position of its members. The floor is now open. The majority calls upon the Inquisitor, what relation does Ref. X1-014 alias, Reaper maintain to 6507B178C0BB441C alias, unknown entity, collector, //. Inquiries have revealed that 81EE3D88BA68-4A68 alias, Nezra, Sovereign knew of 6507B178C0BB441C alias, unknown entity, collector, but there is insufficient information to establish a known connection to Ref. X1-014 alias, Reaper. It should be noted that no information disproving this relation was found either. Conclusion, relation unknown, possible. / more information is needed. The majority requests the assignment of resources to investigating the role of 6507B178C0BB441C alias, unknown entity, collector in regards to the threat //. The minority does not object to this request /. The Assembly notes the request from the majority %. The minority inquires as to the status of 81EE3D88BA68-4A68 alias, Nezra, Sovereign. 81EE3D88BA68-4A68 alias, Nezra, Sovereign has been isolated upon conclusion of interrogation. Final determination should be made by this body. The minority would suggest that 81EE3D88BA68-4A68 alias, Nezra, Sovereign remain interred until Ref. X1-014 alias, Reaper has been addressed // the majority does not object // The floor is now closed. Are there any other matters that require the Assembly's attention? The majority is satisfied / the minority is satisfied. May the mantle show us all / /and guide our steps on the path into the void / for all to see and prosper. The session of the Assembly is now ended. August 4th, 2180/17 th day of 8th month, 2459/August 4, 2589. Communications Room. SSV Normandy. Jane and Lyra were some of the first to enter the briefing room, at least in regards to the coming mission. A multitude of terminals line the walls around the large hollow table, each manned by a naval officer of the Systems Alliance. Several of them glanced over but made no comment as they returned to their tasks. Spectre Vakarian nodded to them even as he leaned over the table examining a map of their target, the protein beacon glowing a dull red to indicate their primary objective. On the other side of the table stood Captain Anderson along with a serious woman that Shepard instantly pegged as a spook, both by her aloof mannerisms as well as the Cerberus symbol emblazoned upon her left breast. The intelligence officer looked at the two of them with an even gaze, her eyes barely flicking over Lyra before dismissing the Asari completely as she focused on Jane. The commander met her stare with a calm confidence as she wondered about the identity of their resident spook but unwilling to give her the satisfaction of asking. Anderson ended up solving that dilemma as he waved a hand between them and stated, Agent Miranda Lawson, Commander Jane Shepard, Dr. Lyra T. Sony. Miss Lawson will be joining us as our primary intelligence officer, coordinating targets and asset deployment between elements of the Joint Command. So making sure that we don't run headlong into a battle zone, Shepard summarized as she glanced at the captain. That's not how I would describe it, but close enough, Miranda replied, her eyes not leaving Shepard. I've heard good things about you, Commander. I look forward to seeing how many are true. Jane watched Lyra wander over to the hollow table next to Spectre Vakarian before she responded, you aren't the only one. What are we waking into here? A battle zone, Agent Lawson admitted freely. Lovely, Shepard grumbled as she finally stepped forward to join them at the hollow table. She eyed the map that Garrus was examining for a moment before turning her attention down to the information in front of the captain and Cerberus agent. She immediately recognized it as a tactical map of the front lines in the terminus, or at least the small part of the front that they were concerned with. The Batarians' territory stretched across the map and clashed against Alliance claims in several places, but that wasn't particularly representative of the current situation. Multiple fleets were marked on the map along with arrows indicating where they were suspected to be heading, all of which made it clear that the space near Eden Prime might soon be an active theater in the conflict. While they waited for the rest of the team to arrive, Jane moved over to examine the cityscape that lay on the other side of the table. The Spectre nodded to her but said nothing as his eyes ran over the hollow table, obviously planning a route through the maze of buildings that surrounded their target. Since she was hardly responsible for their passage through what might soon become an active orbital battle, Shepard focused on the ground side as she quickly built a plan of defense should they come under attack while extracting the beacon. It quickly became clear that the buildings in the city proper were designed with such concerns in mind, a not unreasonable precaution seeing as the Alliance was well aware of the risks of operations in the terminus. Unfortunately, the dig site was not nearly so well built, its temporary nature lending itself to prefabs and instacrete that would provide for poor cover in a firefight. Over the next several minutes the last three members of the briefing entered the room, each taking their place around the hollow table. Commander Shepard was familiar with each of them, unlike the Cerberus agent that continued to dutifully stand by Anderson's side. The Asari Justicar Samara stood apart from the rest as she simply watched the room, her ancient eyes drifting over everyone as if she was completely detached from the crew. Mordin Solus was busy discussing the protein beacon with Lyra, the two of them examining a detailed view on the Solarian's Omni tool as they tried to plan how to extract it. Shepard suspected that the Solarian was an STG plant amongst the crew, but at the same time she didn't care to challenge the scientist seeing as he seemed to provide some knowledge regardless of his origins. The last member of the team was a powerful human biotic by the name of Jack, though Jane reserved judgment on the rather surly young woman as she stood next to the Asari Justicar and glared at anyone who looked her way. With everyone assembled, Anderson took control of the hollow table and expanded the tactical map he had been working on with Lawson. The captain looked at all of them before beginning. The Citadel Council has ordered that we retrieve a protein beacon from the surface of Eden Prime and transport it to the Citadel for further analysis. This mission is a shakedown to allow the crew to become familiar with this ship. We do not expect any ground-side combat. The ground team will secure the beacon and assist Dr. T. Sony and Dr. Solus with preparing it for extraction. Engineers and scientists on site should already have the beacon prepared for transport, so we should be able to move quickly. Anderson paused for a moment before continuing, that being said, STG reports indicate that Terminus pirates are planning on hitting Eden Prime sometime in the next 48 hours. The hegemony does not appear to be committing forces to this attack, but it should be noted that we may be entering an active combat situation at some point. Alliance reinforcements are already inbound to intercept any attacking force, but it should also be noted that a Warden battle group is present in the area. It is possible that they will intercept and destroy this element, or in the worst case engage them over Eden Prime. We do not want to be there if that happens, regardless of the outcome. The Normandy is equipped with a suite of stealth technologies. We will insert, deploy, acquire the target, and exfiltrate as fast as possible. This is not a ship built for frontline combat, and certainly not one fit for the heavyweight fights that the Wardens tend to initiate. If the situation begins to degrade at any point during our mission, the Normandy will maintain position and refrain from interceding, the captain concluded. Spectre Vakarian took that as his cue as he stepped forward and brought up the map of the Protein beacon site on the surface. He traced a line from an open area to the beacon as he stated, as Captain Anderson mentioned, the focus of the ground team will be recovering and protecting the Protein beacon. We will be deploying from the outskirts where a landing pad has been prepared for the Normandy and proceeding along this route to the dig site. There are no hostile elements on the ground currently. With the pirates inbound we need to plan on possibly fighting our way in or out. There are multiple Alliance security teams stationed around the area to assist if necessary. We go in ready for a fight. Any questions? We are not to assist in the defense of this colony. Samara inquired calmly. If the attackers reach the surface we presume they will target heavy population centers, at least based on previous attack patterns. The Alliance has deployed their own forces to defend the colony, the addition of our team will not make a difference in those numbers. We have no reason to believe they know of the beacon, they're being driven here by the ongoing conflict against the Wardens. We're a small special operations team, get in and out fast. If these pirates get in our way, get rid of them, but our primary objective is the beacon, Gurus repeated. Jack huffed and snarked, the Alliance is just going to let the Wardens pick a fight in their backyard. Gurus glanced to Captain Anderson as the human frowned and replied, currently the Alliance has taken a stance of neutrality in the Wardens' conflict against the hegemony. The fleet approaching Eden Prime is not an officially declared hegemony force and falls under the treatise regarding unaffiliated armed elements violating Alliance space. If the Wardens engage them over Eden Prime then they can technically argue that they were interceding to curtail pirating activity, and the Alliance is not willing to sacrifice the political leverage necessary to argue that. In this case it works to our advantage to have a distraction so we can accomplish our mission. How are we defending the beacon if we get into a firefight on the surface? Jane asked. The artifact is small enough that a container has been built for transporting it. Some shields have been jury-rigged around that to provide a semblance of protection, but it is still a valid concern. If necessary Jack or Samara can be assigned to provide additional biotic shields against incoming fire, Gurus answered. Fucking babysitter duty, Jack grumbled. Jane spared a glance to the brooding biotic before she noted, I still don't like it. It's a clear target. Welcome to Spectre missions, Vakarian responded succinctly. If that is all, we will be arriving at Eden Prime in approximately 33 hours, and landing on the surface shortly after. Another briefing may be called if the situation deteriorates further. Until then, dismissed, Anderson declared. The bridge of the Normandy was strangely calm considering the intimidating sight sitting only a short distance away, at least a short distance in terms of interstellar travel. Even as they slowly approached the glimmering sphere of beauty that was Eden Prime, Jane kept her focus on the Warden battle group that was slowly drifting by as it orbited the planet. It had arrived shortly before the Normandy and settled into a simple geosynchronous orbit, completely ignoring the somewhat tense posture of the nearby Alliance defense flotilla that had already been guarding the area. While it was not nearly as impressive a display of force as she had seen in the Sol system, it was notable in a different regard as the radically different designs of the ships in the battle group created an odd clash of color and style. Dark grey bricks of human design sat next to the flowing silver lines of former Covenant species, though Jane was somewhat glad that the ships weren't the deep purple that the alien theocracy had so preferred. A single Forerunner Guardian hovered in the center of the formation, the sharp angles and silver metal creating a dangerous beauty that was both captivating and terrifying in the violence that Shepard knew it could unleash. Unlike the Citadel strategy of spreading ships out into separate groups to disperse focused fire, the battle group was tightly clumped around the two massive carriers that dwarfed everything in system except the mass relay. It was a strange deployment, almost like a death ball of metal and firepower that would simply plow through anything that got in its way. Eventually the visual of the Warden battle group fell away as the Normandy dropped towards the planet below, its nose slowly tilting to drive through the atmosphere as they rushed towards their target. With their landing imminent, Shepard glanced at the Council Spectre before turning to head towards the vehicle bay. As she donned her helmet, she heard Vakarian follow her as his footsteps matched her own. The ground team was already assembled when she arrived, each wearing different armor and wielding a wide variety of weapons. The stray thought entered Jane's mind that she was looking at the troop equivalent of the Warden battle group in orbit, a strange menagerie of individuals working towards the same goal. A small smile was concealed by her helmet at the thought of Blue Team and other members of the Wardens adding to the diversity, but she quickly dismissed the thought as she concentrated on the mission. The various members of the team looked up as she entered, all of them except Jack rising as they prepared to deploy. Though Spectre Vakarian was technically the mission lead as a council-appointed Spectre, Jane knew that he was just as much here to evaluate her capabilities as both a soldier and leader. Thus she did not hesitate to declare, "We're approaching the AO. Weapons loaded but keep them checked. Doctors, you have the front here, the local team is waiting for us to land. Talk to them, figure out what we need, what you need, and we'll follow. With luck we'll have some warning of incoming, but let's not bet on it. From what I understand you can both handle yourselves in a fight, so if bullets start flying then I want you two on the beacon. Everyone else will be mobile, expect a light urban environment with no heavy armor." Questions. Rules of engagement. Jack questioned bluntly. "If it comes to a firefight, if it shoots at you you blast it back to hell. I don't find myself particularly eager to try and accommodate pirates, that and we don't have the personnel to take prisoners. We aren't looking for a protracted engagement, speed is our friend. From what I understand most of the site is prefabs, property damage is not a concern but be aware there will be friendlies," Shepard responded. A soft thud reverberated through the hull of the ship as it reached the ground, followed shortly after by the hiss of hydraulics as the vehicle bay door began to open. Jane stepped forward to the front of the group, an M99 saber held loosely in her grip as she surveyed the area. A small group of humans was waiting on the edge of the landing pad, several of them clearly scientists while the rest were armored Alliance soldiers. Aside from the armored tug next to them the area was clear, with no sign of the usual civilian presence that would have been a security concern. Shepard holstered her weapon and stepped to the side slightly as she turned to Lyra and stated, "Doctors, you're up." Morden was instantly moving, the Solarian quickly approaching the group as the rest of the ground team followed at a more sedate pace. Shepard ignored the conversation between Dr. Solis and the local Alliance team as she looked out over the dig site. Lyra brushed by her as the Asari archaeologist joined in the discussion, leaving Jane to examine the cheap INSTA-crete structures that had been used to house the dig team that found the beacon. The place was clearly not built to last and could probably be torn down by a well-fueled bulldozer, an intention design choice for a short-term archaeological site. What mattered to Shepard was that the walls did not look sufficient to stop anything greater than a pistol, meaning their use as cover would be visual alone. That was both good and bad, at least so long as the pirates didn't suddenly start deploying APCs onto the colony. So long as they could keep the number of attackers thinned out then they could hold, if the pirates deployed here in force then it would be a struggle to make any headway without a proper defensive line. Of course if that happened then it meant operational security had been compromised anyways, though there wasn't anything that Shepard could do about that now if it came to pass. A wave from Lyra drew Shepard's attention, drawing the commander over as the Asari explained, "They've got the beacon ready for transport down by the dig site. We'll drive down so Dr. Solis and I can examine it, then we will hitch up the cart to this tug and pull it back here." "Quick and efficient, I like it," Jane commented. One of the soldiers interjected, "A general evacuation order has been given, we have pirates inbound. Once we're done here we're off to the glassing shelter. We'll be out of your hair soon." "You're examining it here?" Jane questioned, looking back to Lyra. "For damage only, investigating what it contains will take years," Lyra responded. Shepard nodded and shouted, "Everyone load up, let's move." The ride to the dig site was strangely calm, the only sound being the gentle hum of the tug as it rumbled over the metal slats that made up the road surface. It was clear that the dig site had been abandoned in a hurry, with many items left behind as the civilians working here fled in the face of an imminent attack. Shepard knew that they would soon be back, so long as the site wasn't destroyed, but it was still a strange sight given the beautiful day. A small guard of Alliance soldiers stood around the cart holding the beacon as they arrived, their weapons held at low ready as they waited impatiently. Shepard ignored their fidgeting as she hopped off the tug and walked over to examine the beacon, not out of the desire to do anything specific but more to sate her own curiosity. It looked strangely wrong next to the Alliance technology, a clearly alien construct that was simply out of place amidst the otherwise unremarkable landscape. Jane quickly moved out of the way as Morden slid by her, the doctor completely focused on the beacon as he scoured the surface looking for something. Somewhat amused at the Solarian's muttering as he became engrossed in his work, the commander stepped back and smiled slightly at the exasperated glance Lyra shot her as the Asari tried to direct Dr. Solis. As the ground team awkwardly stood around watching a couple of engineers hooking up the tug to the makeshift transport, the two doctors met with the other scientists as they discussed whatever it was they were doing. Their respite was interrupted as their communication channel suddenly activated. "Captain Anderson to ground team, hostile elements just exited the relay. How are we looking out there?" Shepard glanced at Lyra and got a nod from the Asari, indicating that she acknowledged that they were now on a fairly strict clock. Keying up her comms, the commander replied, "Beacon is secured and ready for transport. We will be moving shortly." "Acknowledged, Anderson out. Form up and let's move, people." Jane shouted, prompting a flurry of activity as the team hopped back up onto the tug. A decent number of the soldiers did not follow as they and the local scientific team headed in a different direction, likely the route to the glassing shelter if Shepard had to guess. Lyra and Morden were the only two that boarded the cart holding the beacon, the two of them kneeling on either side as they continued their previous discussion. The reason that the Alliance had dispatched the tug became clear as the hum of its engine increased and it slowly pulled away from the dig, the tow bar between it and the cart creaking under the strain. Fortunately the going wasn't too difficult as the metal slats in the ground allowed the powerful vehicle to pull the immensely heavy beacon towards their waiting ship, though Jane did wish it could go a little faster given their rush to get off the planet. Her eyes kept a constant watch on the skies for the several minutes it took them to reach the landing pad, though she didn't let her guard down even as the Normandy came into view. With the ship's vehicle bay open it was a simple enough task to drive the tug straight into the hold, detach it from the beacon, and then step aside as the driver skillfully backed out. Jane watched the driver of the tug park it before she joined the remaining Alliance soldiers on a shuttle waiting near the edge of the pad. Before she could close the vehicle bay or even give a call to Anderson, the Normandy was lifting off as it prepared to flee. The doors soon cut off her view of the outside, leaving Shepard free to turn and help secure the beacon in the hold as she felt the ship begin to accelerate. Once that was accomplished with the help of the rest of the team, Jane called out, "Nice and smooth, but we're not out of it yet. I think boarding action is unlikely, but for the sake of learning the ship report to stations." "Gurus, on me." "Well, that was fucking boring," Jack commented crudely, drawing a smirk from Shepard at the blunt honesty of the tattooed woman. Jane didn't wait to see if her orders were followed, that was something she could worry about after they were no longer in an active war zone. As they walked, Shepard opened a channel to Anderson to report, "Beacon is secure, ground team is deploying to stations. Spectre Vakarian and Commander Shepard en route to command." "Affirmative," Anderson replied, his attention obviously elsewhere. The lift felt like it took forever as the two of them made their way to the CIC, the agonizing weight frying Shepard's nerves as she tried not to fidget. Finally the doors opened and she was able to march forward, her armored boots clomping heavily against the floor as she saw Anderson still bent over the hollow table. The battle in orbit was playing out in front of him, with dozens of icons moving above the planet as the Normandy rose to meet them. The captain merely glanced at them for a moment, though he moved slightly so the Spectre could join him in watching the data stream. Shepard knew that she would be reviewing her performance with the Turian later and she was of little help in coordinating fleet actions, so instead she continued past the two of them. The Normandy was still in the upper reaches of the atmosphere when she arrived behind the pilot's chair, the man at the helm looking up at her in surprise for a moment before he returned to his task. Shepard ignored his look for the moment as she focused on the black emptiness of the void that was slowly growing as they ascended into orbit. There was no sign of the battle here, though Jane knew that would change as they broke free of Eden Prime's gravity well to make the jump to the mass relay. Indeed, it was only a short time later that a brilliant white beam flashed across their view as the Normandy began to approach the geosynchronous belt. A few motions from the pilot and suddenly the screen zoomed in on the ongoing conflict, at least if it could even be called that. It was clear that something had crawled up the collective asses of the Warden battle group and died as they annihilated every bit of resistance with extreme prejudice. Another lance of light came from one of the curved, silver ships as its plasma projector sliced a cruiser in half. Other ships were little more than floating debris, courtesy of Mac rounds from the UNSC ships that lurked on the edge of the carnage and used their heavy point defense weapons to eliminate survivors. Shepard frowned at the excessive force on display, not in a show of sympathy for the pirate scum but rather a symptom of her curiosity as she wondered why they were being so aggressive. "They're making an example." Jane glanced over the Spectre Vakarian as the Turian stared out at the massive vessels, his expression unreadable as he stepped up next to her. After a moment of consideration, the commander asked, "For the Council or the pirates?" "I was thinking about the Council, but I could see the other side as well," Gurus admitted. "Make them understand that things are changing, pick a fight and they will end it," Jane summarized. "Same message they're sending to the Council," the Spectre muttered. After a second of silence, he added, "It could also be for the Alliance." Shepard understood instantly as she realized, that would be a hell of a PR stunt. What does it cost them? A few accelerator rounds and time? A pirate fleet against a battle group is insane, let alone with their carrier-class ships providing frontline support. If the Alliance sees the former Covenant fighting alongside human ships, though? Defending a human colony? That turns heads, Gurus stated. "You think they're trying to pull the Alliance away from the Council?" Shepard wondered. "I think the Alliance believes in the Reapers, and I'm pretty sure the Wardens do as well. If I was an interstellar empire that was about to inherit the knowledge and power of the Proteans, capable of creating things like those ships, space elevators, all the stuff we saw on Earth, why would I care about the Council? Beyond basic diplomatic niceties, the Council is simply too far away to matter to them, to influence in any meaningful way," Vakarian explained. Jane narrowed her eyes at the Turian as she picked up on his suggestion, "Unless you influence a similar faction within that Council. If they're too far away, the only option is to get them to save themselves." Gurus nodded slightly and added, "When that faction is about to become a powerful member of that Council, able to influence decisions? Makes for a pretty good ally to have." "We're not a member yet," Shepard noted. "Semantics, you acquitted yourself on that mission. It didn't really matter what you did, so long as you didn't totally fuck it up. I knew you could fight given your work on Torfan, but now I know you can lead. The Council cannot afford to lose the Systems Alliance, it would give the Wardens far too much power far too close to the Citadel. The Alliance will have their Spectre, and the Council will secure their hold on the Alliance. It's all just politics, Gurus explained with a hint of disgust. Jane only barely noticed the approaching mass relay, but she ignored it in favor of the Spectre as she asked, "Why are you telling me this? The Alliance thinks that something is coming. Maybe it was the Covenant when we first met you, but now it's the Reapers." The Wardens seemed to agree. If the Reapers are coming to kill every idiot in this galaxy, then so long as I'm one of the idiots living here it's probably a pretty good idea to save it. Jane laughed and turned to leave with one last statement, "You're pretty good, Vakarian. I look forward to working with you. This is a bit of a shorter chapter, I acknowledge that. Still, I wanted to get something out for the anniversary of the FIC rather than worrying about length. I can't say when the next chapter will be, and I won't promise when it will be. What I can promise is that I will not just disappear without posting anything. I don't plan to go on hiatus, though I essentially did with a year between chapters, and certainly not to cancel the story. If that changes, I will post. Unless I unexpectedly drop dead in the street, but that's kinda not on me at that point so. Thank you for reading, and until the next one. Chapter 28, Boarding Call. Disclaimer, I own no franchise mentioned in this work. Halo belongs to 343, Mass Effect to BioWare. Here we are again. It was indeed another year between chapters, and while I do apologize for that I also presume it is not particularly surprising to most people at this point. The only thing that's really happened since the last chapter that I can think of is the collapse of leadership at 343i. Hopefully that ends up being a good thing because the previous leadership team was clearly incompetent in my view, and that of much of the fanbase given the reactions to the direction of the franchise. Remains to be seen what changes are made, so far it just seems like the company is dead in the water as Infinite has drifted into a stagnant period of development. I don't really play multiplayer and the story has been completely abandoned it seems like, so I can't really say to have positive thoughts on that front. I guess there's also the TV show. Well, that's a thing. Moving on. Mass Effect is, well, not much going on there that I've heard. I guess there is a confirmed Mass Effect 5 in development, but after Andromeda I'm not sure I hold out fantastic hope. Especially considering BioWare's last major release was Anthem, which was certainly something. An experience, I guess. Sorry to be so negative here but I want to try and explain my thoughts as I am beginning to worry that Halo may fall away from my interest entirely. That statement is strange even now to write seeing as how much time I've put into writing this story, into playing the games, into reading other stories in this fandom. When I started writing Illusion I was fascinated with the worlds of Halo and Mass Effect, obviously given this story. Now, well, other things draw my attention. I'm not cancelling this story, I still hope to complete it one day. But for now, these slow updates will continue. Hopefully I have some more positive vibes when the next update rolls around. Until then, thank you for reading and I hope you enjoy. August 23, 2589/16th day of 9th month, 2459/August 23, 2180. Serpent Nebula. Citadel Docks. For such a small crowd, the group of a dozen or so journalists standing near the entrance of the hangar were impressively capable of filling the cavernous space with noise. Much as he wanted to clear the deck of unnecessary visitors, the chief recognized the unfortunate reality that their mission was as much a public spectacle as a diplomatic overture. Important as any negotiations with the Citadel Council may have been, most people were far more interested in catching a glimpse of soldiers standing around than the blathering of politicians. It was a song and dance that he had become far too familiar with in his position, a specter that haunted him even a galaxy away from Earth and the rest of the UEG. Even with the stringent security measures implemented by CSEC to ensure against any threats to foreign diplomats, every Spartan in the hangar was tense and alert as they scanned the crowd. The two Sanghyla Spec Ops warriors were similarly attentive, their heads constantly moving as they quietly rested near the pile of equipment they had brought with them. Of the last 6 members of the party, only 2 seemed to be paying even a modicum of attention to their surroundings. The Mgalekolo pair were hunkered down in their armor next to the Jiralhani war chief that had been sent by the Banished, the 2 hulking colonies seemingly unconcerned with the activity around them. That attitude was mirrored by the Huragok as it disassembled a variety of items that had been brought to it by a human woman, an ONI handler if her uniform was accurate. Much as Chief wanted to criticize the cavalier attitude, he could at least acknowledge that there probably wasn't much that would be able to realistically threaten the Mgalekolo. In much the same vein he held no illusions that the Huragok would be useful in combat, and while the ONI handler was certainly curious he could also appreciate that she was more concerned with keeping her charge from wandering off. Unlike so many of his kind, the Jiralhani seemed to have a keen mind as he glared at the Citadel citizens with palpable disdain. His crossed arms and relaxed stance made it clear that he considered them little threat, though that didn't stop him from quietly grumbling to himself as he waited to depart. Fortunately it didn't seem that the brute was immediately intending to paint the walls of the hangar in a coat of pulverized civilians. This left just the last member of the group, a solidly built Unggoy that had arrived with the two Sanghaili. Much to the surprise of the chief, the grunt's IFF had reported him as a ranger, far higher than any Unggoy he had seen or fought before. To the credit of the grunt, he seemed as alert as his compatriots and showed no signs of the basic behaviors so common to his species. Interested as he was as to how an Unggoy had achieved a rank usually reserved for elite Sanghaili warriors, Chief didn't let it distract him from other matters. With a few quick thoughts he brought up the status of the SSV Normandy on his HUD, his eyes flicking down to see that the ship had finally entered the Serpent Nebula and was on final approach to the Citadel. The Phantom that had brought them aboard the massive station had long since departed, returning to the Kirel Pattern Ka-class assault carrier that had ferried them to this meeting. The crowd of reporters had already been present when they arrived, and for the last hour or so had been lingering as they waited for a look at the newest Alliance vessel. Their patience was finally rewarded as the somewhat uncomfortable atmosphere was broken by the hangar alarm, a shrill sound that echoed in the confined space as an indication that a ship was on approach. The attention of everyone turned to the vast expanse of stars outside the hangar, the faint shimmering barrier that protected them from the vacuum allowing a clear view of any incoming craft. After several minutes the sleek form of the Normandy finally became visible, much to the excitement of the assembled reporters. John was significantly less enthused as he examined the ship, the smooth curves reminding him far too much of Covenant architecture. The chief ignored his unease as he focused on the mission, his eyes darting between the various soldiers as they all prepared to depart. Seeing that they were all already in motion, he turned to watch the Normandy slide into the docking bay, the small ship settling gently in the cradle as a boarding ramp was extended. The familiar figure of Spectre Shepard appeared as the exterior door of the ship opened, allowing the woman to look at the group that would soon be part of her crew. With a slight tilt of her head she communicated to the chief that he should approach, a gesture that was most welcome as he stepped into the covered gantry and away from the cameras. "Ma'am," Chief greeted as he stopped at the edge of the ramp and gave her a brief salute. Shepard returned the gesture as a matter of courtesy between friendly forces as she responded, "Master Chief. Is everyone ready?" "Affirmative," he replied shortly, adopting the same casual tone as the commander. "Permission to come aboard?" "Permission granted. You can leave your gear on the dock, it'll be brought down to the cargo bay," Shepard informed him. Chief stared at her for a moment before turning his eyes to the doorway, pointedly shifting his helmet to look at the edges of the frame. After a brief second of staring he took a single step back, turning to look at the hulking forms of the Molecular waiting on the dock. To her credit the Spectre quickly caught on as she followed his gaze, only speaking when the chief looked back at her, "Hunters, right?" Chief gave a slight nod but stayed silent as Shepard examined the walking tanks. She gave a short huff and noted, "They're not going to fit in a lot of the Normandy, will they be alright staying in the cargo bay?" "That will be acceptable," John confirmed. "Good. We'll discuss command structure and expectations when everyone is aboard. I have to leave for a meeting with the council in," Shepard paused to glance down at her Omni tool, 73 minutes, give or take. "That should give us enough time to talk a bit and let everyone get introduced." "Understood," John responded. Using his neural link he disabled his external speakers and opened a channel to the other members of the joint team. "Gear will go to the cargo bay, the hunters can board there as well and keep watch over it. The Spectre has asked for a meeting with the rest of us." 3 green lights flickered across the top of the chief's HUD as Blue Team acknowledged his words, the 3 Spartans coming to attention but not immediately moving towards the ship as they gathered their weapons. The rest of the group followed as they moved with practiced efficiency, the soft rattle of shifting armor and weapons lost in the cavernous hangar. Confident that his directions would be followed by the professional soldiers, Chief turned to follow Shepard into the Normandy. Behind him he could hear heavy footsteps as the Jiralhani began clomping up the ramp, the deep snorts of his breathing echoing within the enclosed gantry. Before John could follow the Spectre, a well-kempt but otherwise unremarkable man stepped out of the ship, his eyes swiftly glancing over the Spartans before moving to the rest of the Warden soldiers. With a small smile that did little to hide his nervousness from the astute gaze of a Spartan, the man gingerly stepped past Chief and the brute warlord before walking down the ramp and turning towards the crowd of journalists. Fortunately someone somewhere in the complex logistics chain of the Alliance had the wisdom to send a public relations liaison with the ship as the man set about distracting the civilians from the departing alien contingent. Though the man still seemed nervous in the presence of so many aliens, the chief had to give him credit for drawing the attention of the reporters so effectively. While at first they had been captivated by the gleaming hull of the SSV Normandy, the civilians had quickly returned their attention to the small group of soldiers that had been waiting to board. As John turned and stepped into the ship his eyes darted around the space that greeted him, the soft curves and open passages garnering a critical stare as he contemplated the design. He instinctively began to pick out defensible locations and tactical approaches as he examined his posting for the next while, his gaze trailing up the walls to where they met the roof overhead. There were clear indications that the ship was primarily designed by human hands and minds, but at the same time he could pick out the subtle influence of the Citadel species already at work in its architecture. The ship lacked the hardened design of every UNSC ship, the sharp edges and armored junctions that made boarding a warship a daunting task nowhere to be seen. Even more than 30 years after the end of the war, the action of stepping onto an alien ship without intending to kill everything aboard was a strange feeling. It didn't matter if it was Forerunner, Covenant, Banished, Turian, or any other of a dozen options, John always felt the same subtle tension run through him as he crossed the threshold into the hull. While the Normandy was ostensibly designed and built by humans, he could not ignore those subtle signs of influence from different minds. It was so far removed from the utilitarian philosophy of UNSC ships that it might as well have been alien, a warship built for peace in a galaxy that had long forgotten the hard lessons of the Krogan rebellion. Still, the strangely welcoming corridors of the Normandy were far preferable to the clean hangar that it sat within, the soft hum of the ship a more welcome companion than the clamor of journalists. Spartans had been trained in war and tactics and strategy, much like every other warrior that now joined the crew of the Alliance warship. The undulating crowd of reporters that had gathered to try and catch a shot of the first joint mission between Citadel and Warden forces could hardly be defeated by a hail of bullets. Well, they could, but the chief somewhat doubted that would be helpful to his mission. Putting aside his meandering thoughts, John turned his attention to where Shepard stood just inside the ship. She gave him a smile and stated, "Welcome aboard the SSV Normandy." Chief stared back at her, unsure what he was supposed to say. He noted the Jiralhani coming to a stop behind him, the heavily muscled warrior huffing impatiently as his way was blocked. After a few seconds Shepard's smile grew slightly brittle and she awkwardly continued, "All right, good talk. Do you need time to get settled in or?" "No," Chief interjected. After a moment he added, "Ma'am." "All right," Shepard accepted smoothly, skipping over the interruption. "Well, let's not waste any time then. You'll have plenty of opportunities to explore the ship on your own, but I can give you a basic rundown as we walk. Up front is the pilot's seat and CIC, comms room in the stern." As the Spectre began to walk, Chief quickly checked the helmet feeds of Blue Team, the 3 different perspectives flashing across his HUD in quick succession. Upon seeing that they were already moving towards the Normandy with the rest of the group, he closed the feed and silently followed Shepard. He distantly noted her words as she walked down a set of stairs and pointed out the medical office and labs in the quarters, but most of his attention was focused on his running analysis of the ship. Even for a civilian craft it seemed needlessly spacious. That this was the design for a military stealth vessel almost baffled him. It was so far removed from his experiences with ONI prowlers and other similar ships so as to be almost unrecognizable, though Chief readily acknowledged that the stealth capabilities of this vessel were focused around concealing heat and ignored almost every other potential method of identification. Even with the spacious design for a stealth vessel, the massive Spartan still had to be careful when following the Spectre, as it was quickly clear that the ship was designed for humans and not tall, armored soldiers. It was a difficulty shared by the Jiralhani and Sanghaili as well, something that clearly displeased the brute as he growled slightly while descending the narrow stairs to the second level. Still, regardless of the best efforts of the ship's designers to make their life mildly inconvenient, the entire group was able to arrive at the crew quarters without denting the fresh, new interior of the Normandy. Several other crew members were already looking over at their group, some of them clearly ship personnel while others carried the air of seasoned fighters. He recognized the Turian casually leaning against the wall nearby from the diplomatic party that had visited Earth, at least so he assumed given that the distinct facial marking matched. Across from him was a particularly surly human woman glaring at the entire party as if their existence insulted her, an attitude that was oddly nostalgic as Chief remembered many ODSTs holding that same expression. The last notable individual was far better at controlling her emotions, though John instantly recognized that the woman was an intelligence officer of some sort given her uniform and disposition. Chief suspected that Cortana would hate her on sight, making him somewhat glad that his AI partner was currently handling the deployment of the Dauntless rather than providing him snarky commentary. Shepard confirmed Chief's assumption as she began, "Spectre Gurus Vakarian will be joining us for many of our deployments. He's been working on the Reaper investigation for some time now. I believe some of you have met him before, when he visited Earth a few months ago. He'll be able to get the Council to listen to what they don't want to hear." "I promise nothing of the sort," the Turian denied. "Maybe if I keep saying it it'll eventually be true," Shepard replied, gaining a scoff of amusement from the Turian. The woman gestured towards the intelligence officer as she continued, "This is Agent Lawson, Alliance Intelligence. She'll be our interface for getting information on targets and leads." The black-haired officer said nothing, keeping her arms crossed as she stared at the group with sharp eyes. "Lastly is Jack, one of the Alliance's few biotics strong enough for combat. She'll be joining us for any ground pounding, though I think we'll all need a bit of time to adjust to fighting alongside each other. If the rest of you are anything like the Spartans, then it'll be interesting trying to integrate tactics. We have fought beside the devil before, it is an honor to do so once more," one of the Sanghaili rumbled. He nodded towards Jack and continued, "I have seen reports of these biotics and have considered how they could be best used. They are powerful, but questions remain in my mind that must be answered before I would rely on them." "The fuck you trying to say?" Jack asked. "Jack," Shepard warned with a pointed look. The Sanghaili merely tilted his head, more confused than threatened as he answered, how do your biotics handle energy shielding? Hard light? Plasma? How the fuck would I know? Indeed, and so we may learn together, the Sanghaili replied patiently. His calm and even tone seemed to confuse the woman more than anything as she gave him a strange look before rolling her eyes and grumbling, sure, whatever. As Jack turned to slip into one of the rooms, Shepard stated, thank you for trying. Jack can be abrasive at the best of times. I have seen many with such anger in their eyes before, it would not be the first time it was directed to me or mine. My time with humans has taught me that they are well suited to hate, though some hold it so close to their heart that it consumes them. I should hope that she learns that few are worthy of her anger, the Sanghaili responded. Did you fight in the war? Shepard inquired. Both for, and against, he replied. When I obeyed the pious lies of hierarchs I was offered a place in their honor guard, but I sought a bloodier path. I served in the Covenant Special Warfare Group, Special Operations, and joined the ascetics. When the treachery of our belief was revealed I fought beside the Arbiter, and once the war was over I sought to learn from those who had fought against us for so long. I now serve the Swords with the Riftborn, a unit devoted to joint operations with the humans. Shepard nodded appreciatively as she pressed, and your name? Taham. Good to have you with us, the Spectre stated when it became clear that that was all Taham would volunteer. If you have experience working with humans then hopefully you have some ideas how you can integrate into Alliance units. Perhaps, Taham granted with a small nod. Shepard turned her attention to the other Sanghaili as she asked, and you? And those Ram, Special Operations Commander for the Swords of Sanghelios, the other Sanghaili replied. I assume you have a similar story? Shepard inquired. There are few who can say otherwise, Sram replied. The Spectre gave a slow nod as she admitted, so I would imagine. They were not the first to defy the Covenant, the Jiralhani rumbled, glaring at the two Sanghaili. Before the situation could escalate Shepard interjected, is there going to be a problem? The brute glanced down at her, snorting at her bold tone before turning his gaze back to the elites. Endo was the one to finally speak as he stated, I will not apologize for mistakes which were not my own, but neither will I excuse them. Your people suffered from the lies of the hierarchs just as my own. Those wounds will require more than time to mend, just as with the humans. Is that good enough for you? Shepard pressed when the brute didn't respond. After a second the Jiralhani grunted and relaxed slightly as he responded, it is. Fantastic, the Spectre replied with somewhat sarcastic cheer. Now I don't believe you've introduced yourself. I am Pavayam the Unbreakable, Warlord of the Banished, the brute declared proudly, pounding his fist against his chest. Shepard narrowed her eyes slightly as she stated, I was under the impression that the Banished were an independent group, more mercenaries than representatives of a foreign power. Mercenaries? Bah! Pavayam scoffed with a dismissive wave. The War Master has greater ambitions than serving the whims of those who cannot help themselves. Jiralhani may not know much diplomacy that does not come from the blunt end of a hammer, but that does not mean we do not understand the benefits of making friends with those in charge. Right, Shepard drawled with a hint of doubt in her tone. Well, unfortunately I'm only in charge of this ship, so if you are looking to make connections with the Council then it might be a bit difficult. The Council is hardly worth the air in their lungs, I would not waste time pandering to their meaningless drivel, Pavayam growled. That amused Shepard as she huffed and responded, well I can't argue with that, but then what are you doing here? Atriox wished to make clear that the Jiralhani will not be so easily forgotten, Pavayam replied. I am to report on the progress of our mission and any interesting discoveries we make. Are you familiar with the concept of spies? Shepard inquired bluntly after a few seconds. Pavayam snorted and responded, even in a different galaxy you're the same humans. There are few who are able to twist their words in such a way, the Jiralhani are not one of them. A spy would seek to conceal their actions, I declare them to you now. Even the Sanghaili, for all the mistakes they made, never lied the way the hierarchs did. The way humans do. A straight shooter then, I can deal with that, the Spectre accepted. I still don't quite understand why your boss is so interested in having you here, though. You intend to find the truth regarding these Reapers that have been little more than rumors to now, no? The Warlord asked. We will have other missions but that is our primary focus, Shepard confirmed. Pavayam nodded and continued, and if they do exist, and they are the threat that so many seem to think they are, what will we do? We'll fight, the Spectre confirmed solemnly. And so now you understand why the War Master is interested, Pavayam concluded. If you're just looking for a fight then there's plenty of options already. Any Krogan could tell you that, Shepard pointed out. Ah, but is it a fight worth taking? Pavayam asked. Atriox sees great opportunity in this galaxy, but as with any venture there is a risk to be taken as well. If the Banished are to work here, then Atriox wants to be certain that we do not suffer the same fate as those who came before. Shepard thought over that for several seconds before nodding and admitting, that's a pretty smart approach. Fair enough. The humans called us brutes during the war, savages with little thought or empathy, Pavayam stated. Some still do. Sometimes they are not wrong. Not all Jiralhani are so primitive. Noted. There are many who would say the same about the Krogan, Shepard replied. Pavayam smiled slightly and grunted as he responded, no doubt. Turning her head away from the hulking Jiralhani, Jane looked down towards the young boy as she examined his armor. After a few seconds she stated, haven't met many of your kind. Most don't want to fight, the grunt replied in the usual high, squeaky voice of his kind. He held out his four-fingered hand as he introduced himself, my name is Stolt, I lead the Rangers of Fleet Master Vadam. That's an impressive position, you have quite a bit of experience leading squad actions then. Shepard questioned as she accepted the handshake. Yep, Stolt confirmed. The Spectre glanced over the group and noted, there's a lot of you with leadership experience. Any member of the team should be capable of assuming command if necessary, Stolt countered. The missions could be dangerous. The demons were good at targeting leadership, our enemies may do the same. When Shepard looked to Chief he gave a minute shrug and explained, the Covenant relied on a strict hierarchy. It was strategically viable to execute decapitation strikes on critical targets. Pavayam snorted and stated, killing everything that moved is hardly a targeted strike. Only when necessary for the mission, the Spartan countered. The Jiralhani scoffed but didn't bother to argue. Shepard glanced between them before clearly deciding to let the matter settle as she looked over towards the Huragok, only to pause as she watched the human woman attempting to pry something from its strange tentacles. After a few seconds she seemed to realize that interrupting whatever was going on was not worth her time, so she turned towards Blue Team and noted, you all have been pretty quiet. The four Spartans stared back at her, faces hidden behind their visors as they remained stoically silent. My point, Shepard drawled with a dry look at the four armored humans. She glanced over to the Huragok for a brief moment as she continued, I unfortunately didn't catch any of your names when I visited Earth. I've asked almost everyone else, so if you would care to share. Sierra 087, Kelly finally said after a few awkward seconds. Sierra 058, Linda followed. Fred glanced at John for a moment before supplying, Lieutenant Works, or Sierra 104. Shepard glanced between them before looking at Chief and deducing, and I assume Sierra 117. Ma'am, Chief replied with a short nod. Those are all service numbers, Agent Lawson said, speaking for the first time. Chief turned his head to look at her, silencing whatever argument she was about to make as she stared into his visor. It'd be nice to get to know each other if we'll be working together, Shepard added, relieving the Cerberus agent of Chief's unnerving gaze. Suddenly a new voice chimed in, you're not going to get much more than that. The attention of everyone turned to the ONI handler, causing her to glance between people a bit nervously as she stepped towards the Huragok. Whatever she had been fighting with the alien about, she appeared to have lost as Chief noticed that the floating supercomputer was in the middle of dismantling what looked to be the datapad she had been carrying. Spartans tend to be pretty private about that sort of stuff, she explained. You've worked with Spartans before then, Shepard observed. Not a lot, and they were all S4s, but it seemed to be pretty common knowledge among them, the woman replied. After a moment she straightened slightly and added, I'm Sadie and this here is quick to adjust, or Virgil. Either one works. The Spectre looked over at Virgil, who was still engrossed with his disassembly of the datapad, before turning back and responded, good to meet you Agent Sadie. You're part of the UNSC Office of Naval Intelligence going by the uniform, is that right? It's just Sadie, no agent or ma'am or any of that, the woman replied quickly. If you really insist then I can accept Dr. Indessa. I'm part of the office but I'm not a soldier, I know how to shoot a gun, sometimes even hitting my target, and that's about it. ONI decided to let me be the handler for Virgil here, he was one of the first Huragok to defect from the Covenant. So you're a civilian in charge of babysitting a naval intelligence asset? Shepard inquired. When Sadie nodded she commented, that must be an interesting story. Yeah, it was something else, Sadie replied, clearly lost in memories for a moment. Her voice was slightly more distant as she explained, Virgil saved me when the Covenant attacked Earth. Shepard hummed and responded, sorry for bringing it up. Sadie waved her apology away. The Spectre turned her attention to Virgil as she asked, he's a Huragok, am I getting that right? Yep, or engineers as the UNSC called them during the war. They hate fighting but are amazing with technology, as you can see, Sadie explained, gesturing to Virgil as he slowly rebuilt her datapad. A lot of them defected to the UEG after the way the Covenant treated them, but you probably won't see a lot of them as they're spread throughout the colonies. Yeah, I never saw any on Earth, Shepard confirmed. So what is he? Commander. A voice suddenly called out from the ship speakers. The Spectre paused and looked up slightly as she answered, yes, Joker. So you know those massive things that you sent to the cargo bay? You mean the hunters? Shepard inquired. Sure, I guess. Big metal shields and looked like they could flip a Mako, Joker summarized. Shepard sighed and responded, okay, yes, those are called hunters. Are they causing problems? Well, maybe. I don't know. Joker replied. You don't know, Shepard stated, extending her words to make clear her confusion. They seemed fine, but they look like they've melted. They melted? Joker, they use directed energy weapons and are built like tanks, I don't think they would just melt, Shepard commented with a bit of irritation. Her attitude was returned as the man responded, I don't know, the two of them just collapsed into a giant pile of, worms? I think. Uz finally saw fit to interject as he explained, they are Mgalekolo, a bonded pair, one colony in two bodies. They shall not harm your ship so long as they are fed. Okay, well, that was not as comforting as I was hoping, Shepard muttered. She raised her voice as she stated, I am being told that that is normal, Joker. Thank you for your concern. If you say, Commander, he replied, clearly doubtful. Joker's the pilot of the Normandy, the commander explained, addressing the group once more. She eyed the armored figures as she continued, his bones are very weak though, so I would ask that you all be very careful around him. Don't touch him, sort of weak. Yet you allow him into your clan. Pavayam questioned. Shepard stared at the Jiralhani before dipping her head slightly as she replied, the Alliance needed bodies, and he's a damn good pilot. He may not be running around a battlefield clubbing enemies to death with his fists, but that doesn't mean he's useless. If he's in the pilot seat, it means another soldier can join us in the fight. Pavayam grunted. Good. Good. Shepard asked, clearly somewhat surprised. Yes. You seek to use what resources you have in the most efficient manner rather than discarding those who cannot fight. Their failure to understand that was the death of the hierarchs, it is why I follow War Master Atriox, Pavayam explained. Good to know, the Spectre responded with a nod. She turned back to Uzdaham as she noted, you said that they, Mgal whatever you called them, the hunters, would not harm the ship so long as they're fed. Uz nodded and clarified, the Lekolo consume metals, their appetite led them to conflict with the Covenant. Shepard raised her eyebrow as she pressed, and that shouldn't concern me because they may sate their appetite on the materials they brought with them, they pose no pressing threat to your ship, Uz replied. When the commander looked his way, the chief gave a minute nod indicating that he agreed with the Sanghaila's claim. He was uncertain if his message had been received as she looked back to Taham and responded, if you're sure then I suppose I can't argue. I'll be very annoyed if they eat the nice new deck plating though. They will not, Uz insisted, apparently missing Shepard's sarcasm. He nodded to Virgil and added, that one is far more a concern for causing issues. When Shepard looked over, Sadie simply shrugged and stated, there's a reason Hiragok are assigned handlers. I'll do my best to keep him focused but, well. I see, the commander muttered, eyeing the pieces of the datapad as the Hiragok deftly reassembled the piece of complex device. So this is a regular thing. Yeah, better to let him fiddle than get bored, Sadie replied. I was about to ask you before Joker so kindly interrupted, but what is he doing? Shepard wondered. Sadie took a second to formulate her answer before she explained, Hiragok are fascinated with improving technology, they're constantly looking to tear things apart and learn how they work. They can deconstruct and reconstruct anything, or damn near to it, I haven't seen any examples where they couldn't. As far as we can tell, they remember everything they learn from doing this, which allows them to apply that information to other devices. For example, Virgil has deconstructed my datapad multiple times in the past, but I was able to give him some of the technology available on the Citadel and now he's trying to use what he learned. That seems incredibly helpful, Shepard noted. Of course, it's why the Covenant kept them around even though they couldn't really fight, Sadie pointed out. We were sent to help with any protein technology, see if Virgil could help find anything. So he can learn protein technology and share that information with ONI, Agent Lawson commented. Sadie didn't back away from her glare as she shrugged and agreed, probably that too, yes. I didn't ask and I wasn't told, but that's ONI for you. There's something you're not saying, Lawson accused. I'm not an officer or anything, but as I said I've worked with Spartans before. There are some things I cannot tell you, just as I'm sure there are things you can't tell me. I know certain things due to the work I've done as a handler for Virgil, none of those things should affect you, Sadie responded. Miranda, leave it, Shepard ordered curtly. A frustrated glare was sent at the Spectre as Lawson growled, Commander. It's classified, if she says she can't share then that's that. I'm curious, and if any of that information pertains to a threat to this ship I would hope that that would be shared, but I don't think any work she's done would have anything to do with us, Shepard noted. You're just going to trust her? Miranda asked. She's naval intelligence, Miranda, same as you. You don't need to trust her, but you should know better than to push for classified info, Shepard scolded. Miranda took a deep breath and calmly stated, I am just concerned for the ship, ma'am. I understand that, I appreciate your concerns. On the other hand, there's at least 7 special operations soldiers right here with literally decades of experience, any one of which could decide to try and kill everyone on board. I have no doubt that the vast majority of that experience is highly classified, probably at much higher clearance than a lot of what Sadie has done, Shepard reasoned. After a moment she nodded to the handler and added, no offense. Sadie shrugged and glanced at the chief as she agreed, almost certainly. Lawson stepped close to Shepard and lowered her voice, but Chief's enhanced hearing easily caught her fierce whisper, you're going to let something that can just rip apart technology and learn from it loose on board the Alliance's newest stealth ship? Really? Yes, Alliance Command approved it, and if that goes wrong it's on my head, so drop it, Shepard ordered without even trying to be quiet. As you wish, ma'am. I'll be in my office if you need me, Miranda said, her calm exterior doing little to hide her anger from Chief's eyes as she stalked away. Sorry, Sadie muttered in the ensuing silence. Don't be, Miranda is just trying to do her job, Shepard reassured her. If you're going to be working on our findings, you'll want to talk to Lyra and Morton in the lab, they're our primary research team right now. I'm sure they'll welcome any help they can get, just try to be patient with Dr. Solis. He'll be fascinated by Virgil, but he can be a bit much. The handler nodded and replied, I've dealt with his type before, so long as he doesn't start lighting things on fire I think I'll be fine. That sounds like another story I want to hear, Shepard commented. Sadie shook her head and groaned slightly as she replied, later. Of course, Shepard agreed. Before you go, however, I'd like to at least give you some idea of who all you might encounter. There's some Alliance naval personnel handling the more mundane aspects of maintaining the Normandy, but we also have representatives from other members of the Citadel. You've obviously met Garrus, Jack, and Miranda, for better or worse. Dr. Lyra T. Sony is our resident expert on proteins, she's an Asari and will be spending most of her time in the lab if you need to find her for some reason. Dr. Morton Solis is a Solarian expert in, well, a lot of different things, but mainly genetics and diseases. He'll be working with any biological evidence we find as well as helping out in the medical lab if needed. Speaking of, the medical unit is run by Dr. Karin Shakwas, not much more to say than try not to visit her. There was an awkward pause as Shepard hoped for her joke to land before she cleared her throat and pushed forward, Joker is the pilot, I doubt any of you will need to talk to him but fair warning the name is well earned. Jacob Taylor down in the armory is our quartermaster, he might be able to acquire supplies for you, he will certainly be able to get you some MassEffect weaponry if you want to try using it. He works with Lieutenant James Vega who is our armory chief, if you don't want to be carrying your weapon around all the time then he can store them. Samara is an Asari Justicar, she usually stays in the observation lounge to meditate. Please don't piss her off, Justicars have a strict moral code that can be a little easy to get on the wrong side of. You should get along well, Pavayam stated, looking at the two Sanghaili. Uz clicked his mandibles and looked at the Jiralhani as though simply ignored his taunting. That's everyone that you will probably work with. It's a smaller team than your own but that should give us some good options if we need to deploy and engage from multiple angles, Shepard stated. She paused for a second before asking, at least I assume that none of the rest of you are staying here on the ship with Sadie and Virgil. The blank looks she received in reply made it clear that she was correct. Fantastic, Shepard muttered. Any questions then? You seem to run a pretty loose ship, Sadie observed. There's an old joke that I used to hear when I was in the ranks, it started out with a Turian, a human, and a Batarian walking into a bar, the Spectre stated. She scoffed and shook her head, this ship is that joke taken to the extreme, humans and Jiralhani and Sanghaili and Hiragok and Asari and hunters and so on. I'm sure that some of you are more used to strict military procedures. I'm sure some of you are not, for whatever reason. I won't insist on salutes and marching and following orders, you're all experienced veterans. I don't need to coddle you like some drooling private that doesn't know which end of the gun to point at the enemy. If you feel like my orders are wrong, if you know something I don't, if you can do something I might not know about, tell me. I respect that you all have experience, I ask that you respect that I am no rookie either. Know the mission, know your rules, and hopefully we won't all die to the galactic boogeyman. When no one else spoke, Sadie commented, I don't know about everyone else, but I like that plan. Thank you, it's a work in progress, Shepard responded. If you want to head over to the lab and meet with Lyra and Morton, go ahead. Unless you have suddenly developed a keen interest in squad tactics. I'm good, thank you though, Sadie replied. It was good meeting you Commander, I look forward to working with you. Virgil, come on. The Hiragok didn't move at her words, though he didn't resist as she grabbed one of his tentacles and began gently dragging him towards the lab as Garrus watched with what Chief assumed was an amused expression. All right, Shepard began, bringing Chief's attention back to her. I only have a little bit of time left before I need to head out, but before I go I want to make sure I understand all your capabilities at least on a basic level. Before we begin, however, should we move down to the cargo bay to let them Galigalo, I think that was right, let them join the discussion. That will be unnecessary, Enlo responded. The Lekolo rarely communicate except with each other. They are, as you might imagine, on the field of battle, a force to break through enemy lines and stand firm against any assault. So walking walls, that was what I had assumed, but good to have confirmation, Shepard replied. I don't know that we will have many fights where firepower of that magnitude is necessary, but it is a good option to have, I suppose. If we're starting with the obvious, then I guess the next in line is Pavayam. With a title like the Unbreakable, I assume you are not exactly one for stealth. Pavayam huffed and confirmed, no, I lead the clan of the Long Shields for good reason. All right, yeah, that's fair, the Spectre admitted. Stolt? I am best in a fight alongside Pavayam, the Unggoy admitted easily. Shepard looked to the Jiralhani and asked, that work for you? An Unggoy does not earn the rank of Ranger easily. I am eager to see what skill earned him that respect, the warlord stated. I was curious about that as well. I'll plan on running some spars in the cargo bay at some point, Shepard noted. She eyed the two Sanghaila before stating, special operations is a pretty broad term, I'm not sure where you fit into that spectrum. We fought beside the devil himself in the waning days of the schism, Enlo responded, nodding towards the chief. Alongside the Arbiter we were the tip of the sword that pierced Truth's heart and brought an end to his scheming insanity. I am familiar with the dance of battle, should you ask I stand ready to step into the chaotic fray of plasma and bullets. So too am I prepared to fall into a more familiar role, where the objective may not be the death of our enemies but the elimination of their capability for battle. After a few seconds of silence as Shepard translated the stilted speech of the Sanghaili, she bobbed her head and summarized, so you're more comfortable as an element of a strike group, either as a distraction or to accomplish an objective outside the primary theater of combat, but if need be you can handle yourself on the front lines of a firefight. I assume the same is true with you. The Special Warfare Group trained its warriors to handle many different roles, Uz replied. There are some differences in experience and approach, but none enough to merit discussion here. So the two of you worked together with the chief at the end of the war? Shepard inquired. Correct, Uz confirmed. The Spectre considered that before saying, well, I'll keep that in mind. I know that the Covenant used cloaked elites for some missions, I assume that those units fell under this Special Warfare Group. Did any of your training cover those tactics? Stealth operators reported to Fleet Security, the same as I myself did when I served under Fleet Master Vadum. I never entered their ranks nor did I desire to do so, but I met many in my time in the Fleet of Retribution. Our armor can support a cloaking module should you wish for either of us to undertake such missions, but I would need to acquire the cloaking modules, Uz answered. It would be very nice to have the capability for covered infiltration, Shepard muttered. She bit her lip in thought before saying, we'll see what our missions look like as we go, if you could try and acquire that equipment then I'd like to have the option. As you ask, Uz replied with a dip of his head. Shepard glanced at her Omni tool to check the time before she turned to John and simply said, Chief. Ma'am, he replied calmly. This is your team. Blue team, John confirmed. How long have you all worked together? Shepard inquired. Chief smiled behind his visor slightly as he answered, extensively, ma'am. Several seconds passed as the woman examined Blue team, her eyes flicking over their armor as she clearly tried to figure out her words. She sighed and stated, I assume your team is capable of working in pretty much any role. Affirmative, Chief replied. You're obviously capable of cooperating with Sanghaila Special Operations, I would assume that flexibility extends beyond them. Spartans must be able to adapt to working with any allied unit, John confirmed. He grimaced slightly as memories of the final hours of the war flashed through his mind, the experience of fighting alongside the Flood etched into his mind forever. There was no outward sign of his thoughts as he waited for the Spectre to continue. Shepard wasn't surprised by his answer as she pressed, would you be opposed to working with anyone in particular? It wasn't hard for Chief to deduce that she was thinking of Jack, the erratic and abrasive behavior of the biotic clearly juxtaposed against the stoic professionalism of Blue team. Much as he wanted to single out the possible headache, John kept his voice level as he replied, of course not, ma'am. Would adding additional people to your team increase your effectiveness? Possibly, Chief responded. Possibly. Shepard asked as she narrowed her eyes slightly. Are you saying that having more guns might hurt? John kept his voice carefully level as he admitted, in certain circumstances, ma'am. Care to elaborate? Spartans are expected to undertake missions where survival is not guaranteed. Sending additional forces may not increase the chances of success, Chief answered. You're saying assigning additional members will not appreciably increase the capabilities of Blue team and may, in certain circumstances as you say, put them in a position where their sacrifice is worthless, the Spectre summarized. Chief's voice was firm as he stated, their sacrifice should mean more than my convenience. I'm not arguing with that, not at all, Shepard replied. But this does leave us in a bit of a strange position. I see no obvious way to integrate your squad into the rest of the team. I suppose my first question should be if you expect Blue Team to operate jointly with everyone else or if you would accept splitting the team to work with other elements of the ground team. Every Spartan is capable of operating independently or as an attachment to an existing squad, Chief replied. We will be where we are needed. I am going to assume you mean you are fine with having Blue Team split up amongst the other elements of the ground team, Shepard said, clearly a little annoyed. If that is your decision, ma'am, John replied. The Spectre huffed at his words, but before she could speak Uz interjected, I do not foresee our missions requiring strict optimization of roles. The demons may not reach the heights of their capabilities if separated, but neither should we need them to do so. That's a fair point, Shepard admitted. Looking back at the chief she asked, I assume each member of your team has a specific role. Kelly replied first, scouting and flanking maneuvers. Observation, overwatch, marksman, Linda followed. Close quarters and breaching, Fred stated. Battlefield command and control, Chief finished. Shepard's brow furrowed at that, but she refrained from asking as she said, I'll start with the easiest first then I suppose. Sierra 058, you'll be working with Garrus to start out. He's our resident sharpshooter on the team, the two of you can talk shop on your own time. Linda glanced at the Turian and nodded, but did not otherwise react. Chief and Lieutenant, you two will join me with Pavayam, Stolt, Jack, and the Hunters as the primary assault team. It's a lot of firepower to have on a squad, but we'll be the fist of any operations on the ground. If something gets in our way, we punch straight through, subtlety be damned, Shepard explained. She finally looked at Kelly as she finished, that just leaves the Sanghaili, Sierra 087, and Samara. You four will form the strike team, quick and flexible, perfect for flanking or accomplishing an objective while we draw attention away from you. There was heavy silence as Kelly looked over at the Special Operations Sanghaili, but none of the newly formed strike team spoke up. Does anyone have an issue with their assignment? Shepard inquired after a few seconds. Another silence greeted her question. Fantastic, the Spectre eventually said. I want to be clear that these teams are not strict and are not permanent. We may shift people around depending on the needs of the mission or if internal conflicts become an issue. Depending on how things go in the next few months, I may ask some of you to change teams and put you in roles you may be less comfortable in. This is both for the experience as well as to give you all a chance to work with the multitude of other people in this crew. I encourage all of you to take the time to talk to your squad mates and get at least a decent idea of how they fight, and of course feel free to talk to anyone else on the crew as well. For the moment we will continue the informal command structure. If we need to become more rigid for certain missions then we can deal with leadership assignments then. Is there anything else anyone would like to discuss? Has it been determined where our missions shall come from? Enlo asked. After a whole bunch of political bullshit and saber rattling on both sides, it was decided that missions will be negotiated between the Council and the Warden Ambassador. It's not impossible that that arrangement may change at some point, but we'll deal with that as it comes. Our current directive is twofold: investigate any evidence of the Reapers and assist the Wardens with their campaign in the Terminus. The second part of that is mostly just an excuse to give us free rein of the Terminus and pass any relevant intelligence to the Wardens. We'll be concentrating on the first part as much as possible. Our focus may be diverted from time to time as the Council throws new missions our way, but our primary mission will remain the investigation of the Reapers. Chief waited a moment before asking, quarters assignments. Crew quarters are here, pick an empty one, ask for the crew chief if there are any issues, Shepard responded, clearly expecting the unit full of veteran special operations soldiers to be able to figure out acceptable bunking arrangements on their own. If that's all. No one else spoke up. Excellent. As I said, I have a meeting with the Council, that shouldn't take too long. We're waiting on a supplies delivery from the Alliance, hopefully that will be done by the time I get back and we can be underway shortly. I look forward to working with you all, Shepard finished, nodding to the group before turning to ascend the stairs and exit the ship. Chief didn't bother to watch her leave as he turned towards the crew quarters that lined the deck, his eyes picking out an empty set as the rest of Blue Team followed behind him. Out of the corner of his visor he noted the other warriors doing the same, though he somewhat suspected that they would all be somewhat disappointed with the accommodations. As the door to the room he had approached opened to reveal the welcoming interior, he suppressed his sigh at the reminder that this posting would be unlike any UNSC ship he had served on. August 23, 2589/16th day of 9th month, 2459/August 23, 2180. Serpent Nebula. Citadel Presidium. Jane resolutely ignored the subtle glances sent her way as she walked across the Presidium, though she could still feel eyes on her as she approached the Citadel Tower. She knew that word of her quick acceptance into the Spectres was already spreading, her expedited ascension into the vaunted group providing an unwelcome source of tension between the Alliance and other members of the Council. Already she had received several rather terse messages from the Alliance Ambassador's office requesting that she attend their training on foreign relations, all of which had been swiftly redirected into the trash. She imagined that ignoring the problem in such a way might come back to bite her, but at the same time she simply didn't have the time to entertain their bullshit. The curious stares of various species were finally cut off as she reached the base of the Citadel Tower and stepped into the elevator, the doors closing behind her and giving her a few minutes of quiet to think as she slowly rose to the council chambers far above. Her mind inevitably turned to the cadre of stoic warriors which she had just welcomed aboard the Normandy. Even if she hadn't worked with the Spartans much on her visit to Earth, that brief experience gave her a high level of confidence that having 4 of them on board was an incredible allocation of resources from the UNSC. It was clear that the larger military was incredibly concerned about the threat of the Reapers, though Shepard struggled to figure out why that might be. It wasn't like the UEG was particularly hostile to the Citadel Council. They weren't friendly, certainly, but neither were they overtly hostile. It was possible that she was simply missing the public opinion in favor of watching political undertones, but even after seeing the unrest on Earth there hadn't been a notable shift in the relations between the two powers. There was little love lost between the Batarians and every other species on the Citadel, something Jane knew well since she barely tolerated their existence following the events of Torfan. It was clear that her rapid ascension to Spectrehood was a thinly veiled cover to strengthen the ties between the Systems Alliance and the Council, probably a political move out of fear that the UEG would try to bring the Alliance back into the fold. Regardless of whatever political shenanigans were inevitably taking place in the background, the end result was still the posting of 9 extraordinarily capable Special Operations soldiers to the Normandy. Having grown up in the world of kinetic barriers and MassEffect arms and armor, it had been very strange to see the plasma weaponry that had been used to slaughter billions in person. While she wasn't exactly pleased to be turning those same weapons onto yet more people, the thought of having them on her side rather than aimed at her team was definitely preferable. The council was still in session when the elevator doors opened, letting Jane relax a little as she stepped into the large room of trees and fountains. There were a multitude of different species occupying the edges of the lobby, all of them clearly diplomats or politicians waiting to petition the council. Several members of the sparse crowd looked her way but none seemed inclined to try and talk, something she was grateful for as she marched past them. The climb up the stairs to the audience chambers was short, leaving Shepard to pause at the edge of the petitioner's stage. She glanced at her Omni tool to confirm that she was on time before relaxing into parade rest as she waited for the council to summon her. She could hear some of the conversation happening on the stage, though she didn't need all the words to understand the context as a Turian admiral once again requested that the council authorize intervention in the Terminus conflict. As had been the case for the past few months, the council stood firm in denying the request. Regardless of which side the Turians wanted to support, there was no winning in the public court of opinion as far as the political leaders were concerned. Help the Batarians and they were supporting slavery, help the Wardens and they were assisting a foreign power against estranged allies. Much as Shepard wanted to advocate that the Turians get their hands bloody killing some Batarians, even she recognized that there wasn't much the hierarchy could do to realistically affect the outcome of the conflict, at least not without devoting incredible resources to interfering. It was clear the council's patience was growing short as the Admiral tried to push his case, giving Shepard a nice bit of entertainment as he was finally dismissed. She glanced at the proud warrior as he marched down the platform, meeting his glare with a calm stare as he scowled at her and stalked off. Jane didn't bother worrying about his pissy attitude as she walked up towards the petitioner's stage with the hope that he had irritated the councillors to the point that they would keep her briefing reasonably brief. Spectre, Councillor Tavos greeted as Shepard stepped onto the stage. Councillors, Shepard replied evenly, her eyes flicking between the 3 politicians. Hopefully you were not waiting long, the Asari commented amicably. Recognizing that would be the closest she would get to an apology, Shepard decided to keep the conversation civil as she responded, not at all. Good, Tavos stated. Unfortunately we shall have to keep this short, the conflict in the Terminus is proving to be more disruptive than we had anticipated. It seems to be a popular topic of discussion for a surprising number of people who have never shown much interest in the region. I can imagine, Shepard responded. No doubt, Tavos replied dismissively. Your mission to investigate any leads on the existence of the Reapers remains your primary assignment, I am sure you will be glad to know. I assume that you will be venturing into the heart of the conflict in pursuit of your goal. Shepard carefully considered her words as she answered, some of the locations of interest lie within the Adikan Traverse, and others deeper into the Terminus. I have been assured by Alliance Command that they are working with the Wardens to ensure that we do not run into an ongoing battle. At worst we do have several very capable soldiers on board, so we should be able to handle most issues without help. We were told the Warden contingent arrived just a short while ago, Spiratus noted. You have already met with them. I have. It will be interesting to fight alongside them, Shepard responded neutrally. What are your thoughts on them? The Turian inquired with what seemed like genuine curiosity. Jane considered the question before replying, they're professional, focused on the mission, and capable. I think there will be some difficulties integrating tactics, but that isn't surprising. You're not worried about having them on the Alliance's newest stealth frigate? Spiratus pressed. Alliance Command has approved their deployment on board, Shepard replied. I can't say I don't have concerns, but I'll take what help I'm given. Unfortunately I believe you may need it, Tavos commented. As Shepard looked to her, the Asari explained, "We have detected activity near the Vale." "The Geth?" Shepard questioned with a bit of surprise. Councillor Valerne gave a sharp nod and answered, "Indeed. STG elements have been monitoring activity in the terminus, due to the ongoing conflict of course. We have observed increased traffic near the edge of the terminus. We believe the Geth are watching the conflict, perhaps with the hope of capitalizing on the vulnerability of the region." Shepard glanced between the three as she concluded, "So you want me to go poke around, see what I find? The Normandy is a stealth craft. You can use this as a perfectly reasonable excuse for going into the terminus. You are the obvious choice," the Solarian confirmed. "All right," Shepard said, unable to find a compelling argument against those points. "What do you want me to do if I find the Geth preparing for a war?" "Well, we would certainly appreciate it if you told us," Sparatus snarked. He backed off slightly as Tavos glanced at him. Fortunately, any sizable force would need to engage with the Wardens before they reached Council space or risk being cut off from retreat. That should give us enough time to mobilize the fleets necessary to eliminate them, though I would not be surprised if they deployed rapid strike groups to try and create a panic. Much as he irritated her, Jane still gave the Turian a small nod as she responded, "If I find anything, the Council will be the first to know." "Is that all you had for me?" "There is one other thing," Tavos stated. Shepard did her best to conceal her irritation as the Asari explained, "We are still awaiting details from other assets in the area, but what we do know is that one of the specters that was deployed to the terminus has gone silent. Her name is Tila Vazir, an exceptionally skilled Asari. She was investigating potential crimes in the hegemony relating to the theft of confidential economic data from the Ministry of Finance when the war broke out. We have not heard from her in some time, but she should still be in the terminus somewhere. More information will be transmitted to you when we get it, but if you find nothing in regards to the Geth, then we ask that you search for Spectre Vazir before turning to your primary mission." "Understood, Counselor. I will keep it in mind. I hope your other assets find her before I even get a chance to begin any inquiries," Shepard replied. "Until I hear from you, then." "Indeed, we are unfortunately already on the verge of our next scheduled meeting. We will contact you soon, Spectre," Tavos said, effectively dismissing Shepard. Jane didn't even bother to feel insulted as she turned and marched off the petitioner's stage, slipping past a wealthy-looking Volus as he waddled up to take her place. Fortunately, she escaped the room before the mind-numbing talk of financial business graced her ears, leaving her free to begin making her way back to the Normandy without distraction. "Hope you enjoyed. I found this a surprisingly fun chapter to write. Not much happened, but finally starting to see some plot threads weaving together. In fact, I enjoyed it so much that I actually had it done the day before rather than the 11th hour on the day I planned on posting it. For reference, that's the first time in 3 years that that's been the case. In other news, I am strongly considering cross-posting Ogium to archive of our own. The recent issues with fanfiction have been concerning enough that I find an alternative posting location to merit consideration. I vaguely remember that some people requested that I do so years ago, when this FIC was updating often and regularly. Given the far better tag refinement, stability, and general features, I can see the appeal. Just wanted to let people know since I know some people prefer that site over FF's somewhat dated design and capabilities." Chapter 29, Contemplation. Disclaimer, I own no franchise mentioned in this work. Halo belongs to 343, MassEffect to BioWare. I had mentioned cross-posting this story to AO3 last chapter. While fanfiction seems to have sorted out a lot of the issues when that came out, there's still some weird stuff going on. As such, this story, my completed works, and any future works will be posted to AO3 under the same name for both author and story. I will continue posting on this site as well, so long as it is possible at least. Literally nothing new with Halo or Mass Effect. A quick recap of the last chapter, since I know that keeping track of a story between long update gaps like this can be frustrating. The Normandy crew is finally established, with most though not all members. Shepard is informed of possible Geth activity in the Vale as both an assignment from the Council as well as to cover for her presence in the Terminus. The Wardens are currently undertaking significant military operations in the Terminus due to an attack on Bastion, their beachhead, and staging grounds for operations in the Citadel Galaxy. There's a whole bunch of other stuff going on that will be referenced in this chapter. I once again apologize for the long delays. I know it can be frustrating when reading a story, and it has certainly been a challenge while writing it. Still, at least it's not dead yet. 18th day of 9th month, 2459/August 25, 2180/August 25, 2589. Serpent Nebula. Citadel Council Chambers. Valerne barely acknowledged Tavos as the Asari walked into the Council's private chambers, the two of them having worked together long enough that their morning routine had been reduced to such brief pleasantries. The Asari councillor returned his greeting with equal finesse, the two of them quickly falling into a comfortable silence as they concentrated on the numerous briefings that they would soon discuss. Powerful as the Citadel Council was in theory, that power could only be effectively wielded when the correct information was gathered and passed to people who could actually do something with it. Even though the Wardens had been a colossal pain in the ass for the STG, Valern could at least credit them with providing the push to strengthen the intelligence-gathering capabilities of all Council species. Of course, that wasn't the only shift that had come as the Council walked the delicate line of handling another galaxy-spanning alliance, as clearly evidenced by the grinding conflict in the Terminus. As he scrolled through the most recent, and relevant, reports that had been gathered from the front line, Valern frowned at analysis that had been done on what information they had. With the impressive capabilities of the STG being directed to the Terminus, it was doubtful that they were missing anything that might alter the assessments before him, but the possibility remained even so. Making a note to check with the others as to their own knowledge on the matter, Valern finished the last of his briefings before taking a moment to collect and sort his thoughts before the arrival of the last counselor. Punctual as ever, Spiratus entered the chambers just before they were scheduled to begin. While it was clear that the usual stress of responsibility weighed on him, the Turian showed no sign of struggling under the pressure as he took his seat. As he settled in for the coming discussion, the Turian inquired, "Shall we then?" When Tavos assented by looking over to him, Valern gave a sharp nod and pulled up a map of the Terminus as he jumped right into their first topic. There has been little shift in the Terminus, though not by means of resistance from the disparate elements in the region. The initial push from the Wardens has slowed to a more measured advance, even with most notable resistance already pulling back. Several groups have signaled their intention to exit the conflict entirely, though whether they will be able to stay out of it depends on the strategy of the Wardens. Our intelligence efforts have not gone unnoticed, but it seems that their fleets have orders to allow our presence so long as we maintain our policy of observation without disruption. That's the entirety of what the STG knows. Spiratus pressed with a bit of frustration. Individual reports of fleet movements and engagements, but nothing that our analysts have noted as worth particular attention, Valern replied. Our own efforts have yielded similarly disappointing results, Tavos admitted. I had some hope that your intelligence apparatus might find what we are clearly missing. Valern shook his head slowly as he answered, we have found no signs of subtlety, and the STG believes that is because they are not trying to be subtle. They make no attempts to hide their actions, they are obvious. Visible. A message. To us. Spiratus muttered. Possible, but not alone, the Solarian responded, his words clipped as he spoke while thinking. To the powers in the Terminus, and to all species of the Council. They might wish to show us as vulnerable, or incapable, to break the unity the Council represents. It could be to unite us, Tavos noted with a frown. Spiratus scoffed and argued, they have already peeled the Batarians away, and the Alliance clearly maintains some level of connection to Earth. The migrant fleet has disappeared into the depths of Warden space, and the STG has already theorized that the activity on Tuchanka is connected to similar efforts. With the Quarians to help them understand our technology, the Alliance to spy for them, and Krogans to fight, I think it is clear that they intend to escalate this conflict and expand beyond the Terminus whenever it pleases them. An option not to be discarded, but for what end? Valern wondered. To destroy us and bring us under their control, Spiratus stated confidently. They have shown no interest in folding the Batarians into their ranks, Tavos countered. Valern frowned and corrected, the hegemony, certainly, but if that collapses? The STG has kept careful eye on the Batarians, and while we have not seen any odd movements, the collapse of the hegemony under the pressures of a direct conflict with the Wardens might give such an opportunity. A problem that has existed for some time, Tavos noted. The hegemony has always been belligerent, their withdrawal from the Council in the face of the consequences of their actions was not something we could control. We knew that granting a seat to the Alliance would be unacceptable to them, but yet we agreed that closer ties with a human faction was of greater importance. I stand by that decision, and as I see it, if the Wardens become entangled in whatever government succeeds the hegemony, then it will serve to distract them from further expansion. This Council and the Wardens are aware that a conflict between us would be foolish, but clearly they have already established some foothold from which they are dispatching the fleets in the Terminus. With their access to slipspace and the unexplored relays that are scattered across the region, I do not see any way in which our interference now is beneficial. They possess an unassailable position beyond our capability to observe, with fleets capable of striking out across the galaxy with no warning. Reinforcing the planets closest to the Terminus only invites them to strike deeper, we must instead focus our forces around vital assets, Spiratus muttered with frustration. Grimacing, he looked up to the other two as he explained, the Primarch has already presented the problem to hierarchy assets and they agree. A defensive stance is our only course of action until we can either block their method of FTL or have intelligence on possible first strike targets. STG concurs, though from what the Alliance tells us even the Wardens do not have the capability to block slipspace travel, Valern pointed out. Spiratus grunted but did not disagree as he stated, then we are stuck exactly where we are. They clearly have some established presence on the north rim of the galaxy, one that we would be hard-pressed to dislodge if there are no relays close to it. Their initial push into the Terminus was extraordinarily aggressive, but with this shift they seem to be digging in for an extended campaign. I just can't figure out why, they held the advantage only to discard it halfway into the operation. It is possible that conquering worlds was not their objective, Tavos said. At the dubious look from the Turin counselor she explained, if they're applying extended pressure in the hopes that the hegemony collapses, that might explain this strategy. Some Asari political analysts, however, have suggested that this is the result of domestic politics to justify the deployment of warden forces so far from their territory. It explains why they've slowed their advance, used the early push to create the hope for an easy victory and then spend years going essentially nowhere. Would justify larger military expenditure as well, Valern noted. Sparatus thought on that for a bit before admitting, it is a strong possibility, but they could also be establishing a beachhead for a larger assault on Citadel space. Unlikely, occupation of Citadel space would be enormously difficult and provide almost no benefit, Valern argued. They have far more planets available far closer to their existing territory, and any industrial capabilities on Citadel worlds would be irrelevant considering the completely different technological base. While they make clear their scientific interest in Element Zero and its properties, so too is it clear that they have no interest in moving away from their existing methods. A stands for which I cannot fault them. Would it be possible that their operation is intended to allow us to expand into the terminus? Sparatus asked. As the other two counselors looked at him with curiosity, he gestured to the hollow map and explained, the terminus has been a problem for years, an entire region of the galaxy essentially abandoned to corporations and piracy. Clearly the Wardens have established some presence in the far reaches of our galaxy, but that obviously did not sit well with the factions in the area given the activity that the STG observed. Their fleets are limited in number, but extremely effective in heavy engagements. Now that they've broken the resistance of the terminus, it would allow us to move into the region without deploying the numerous fleets that were previously necessary to handle rogue elements. Valern nodded as he considered the suggestion, his distraction clear as he replied, moving into the terminus now risks creating issues with Warden forces, but it is an opportunity to finally begin addressing the issue. If the Wardens are after territory, then seizing it ourselves would force them to concede or draw us into the conflict. A risky proposition, but not impossible to achieve. The Republics can commit additional forces to the region, but the bulk of any forces would come from the hierarchy, Tavos noted. Of course, Sparatus agreed, waving off the concern. Much of what is already in the region is STG elements, but we would need a visible show of force. I would have to talk to the Primarch, but I doubt it would be an issue considering the reduction in pirate activity. Then this is our course? Tavos inquired. The Solarian counselor nodded as he summarized, if we watch and wait, we leave the Wardens to subsume the terminus and hegemony, or to withdraw and leave the problem to fester. Moving to establish the Citadel as an active power in the terminus risks conflict with the Wardens or plays into their plans, yet also allows us to assert our position as the primary power in the galaxy. Whether it is true or not, the illusion that we have that power will give us leverage to influence the conflict. So long as we do not enter a direct confrontation with the Wardens, Tavos corrected. A risk by which we must abide, Valern agreed. I will discuss it with the Primarch, Sparatus stated. It will take some time to position fleets and establish a strategy for advancing into the region. Valern nodded and offered, the STG has already begun analyzing how we might approach such an effort. Our expectations were for the slaughter of civilians or the destruction of planets, given the liberal use of glassing in the Covenant War. Fortunately the Wardens have refrained from such tactics, though we know that there has already been significant population displacement as people flee the front line. We can move into the terminus under the guise of preparing for refugees from the conflict, Tavos suggested. So far we have not been intercepting transports moving through the relay network, but many of those fleeing seem to be staying in the terminus rather than coming to Citadel space. We know that many of the mercenary and pirate forces have coalesced around Omega, obviously not surprising given its prominence in the region. We did observe several Warden vessels visit the station a short time ago, though whether they were delivering a warning or a threat is unknown, Valern reported. Tavos did not seem surprised as she responded, as I would expect given that Omega has been a prominent player in the terminus long before the Batarians joined the Citadel. It has opposed every attempt by the Council to interfere in terminus business, as both of you well know. I doubt that Arya will find the Wardens so willing to overlook her presence, especially if she supports the forces operating against them. The Council has been able to dissuade conflict with the Wardens because of how much space we occupy, Sparatus noted. The terminus is quite large, but clearly the Wardens are not interested in all of it. Omega is a clear, decisive target, which is perfect for their style of warfare. If they are truly set on clearing out the problematic elements in the region, Omega will fall. The Wardens are not burdened by the limitations we work within, we know they have the firepower to simply erase the station and the capability to take it if they wish. It would provide them a significant position from which to control the terminus, if they decide to do so. We can challenge the Wardens for territory in the terminus, but I do not believe we should make a play for Omega, Tavos responded. Any conflict that involves the station will draw attention from every mercenary, pirate, and criminal in the galaxy. We would be able to take it, at significant cost, but it would throw the entire region into chaos for decades. And the wardens taking it won't cause chaos? Spiritus muttered. Tavos scoffed and replied, oh, it most certainly will, but it won't be the council taking the blame for it. There will be deaths, and not just of those fighting, Valern pointed out. We put out a message urging those who can to flee, Tavos countered. We give them somewhere to go, away from the front line, let the wardens make a mistake. There will be calls for the citadel to intervene, to try and broker peace, Spiritus predicted. Tavos nodded, of course there will, and we may offer to bring both sides to the negotiating table. I doubt either side will accept, the wardens because of their arrogance and the terminus because there are a dozen different factions and only a few would talk with us. So we identify where we can push into the terminus and expand our reach by offering a haven from the fighting to those who seek it, thus extending our influence in the region. What do we do with the problem of the hegemony? Spiritus inquired. They might accept calls for peace, but given the attitude of the wardens towards slavery I doubt they would entertain talks, Tavos stated. Without the support of the citadel the hegemony stands alone against an enemy that is quite possibly as ruthless as the Krogan. The Turian sighed and replied, the hegemony has a lot of problems but they do field a number of dreadnoughts, obviously in the hopes that they could achieve a seat on the council. There would have been outrage, it was bad enough that they continued to practice slavery after becoming a member, Tavos muttered. I know, it was never realistic considering their social order, Spiritus agreed. The collapse of that order will inevitably be messy, and those dreadnoughts falling into the hands of pirates and mercenaries may prove a problem for us as well. If someone with any intelligence gains command, they won't dare to test it against warden vessels when there are far less murderous targets. The collapse of the hegemony will be something that all species must adjust to, almost a repeat of the Quarians' mistakes in regards to a doom of their own creation, Valern said. The STG has run predictions on possible results, but there are too many variables to reach a satisfactory model. In all of our realistic predictions, it will be an unpleasant and expensive affair, in both lives and productivity for the Batarians. Spiritus scoffed and noted, it was always going to get messy, the insistence of the hegemony that slavery was some sort of abhorrent cultural tradition ensured that. Regardless of their past claims, if, or perhaps when, the hegemony collapses, we need to be able to respond, Tavos stated calmly. The situation will likely deteriorate quickly, so I would like to have at least an idea of how we wish to handle this. With hierarchy fleets moving into the terminus it would be easy for us to involve a quick reaction force to secure hegemony territory, Spiritus stated. We don't have the forces for a full occupation, but we just need to be able to establish control over the relays. Once that is done we can deploy to individual worlds, assuming that the hegemony falls to pieces rather than imploding. Tavos considered that before remarking, it's a good option to have, but we'll have to be careful with moving in. Too aggressive and we might spark a conflict with fleets that remain loyal to the hegemony. As worlds break free of their jurisdiction they might take extreme measures, giving us an opportunity to intervene on behalf of Citadel law rather than as a play for territory. We should provide aid where possible, influence positivity to the Citadel with those breaking away from the hegemony, Valern added. If the population is amenable to our presence it will make it far easier to operate in the region. As well as give us an advantage in establishing cordial relations with whatever government takes the place of the hegemony, Tavos suggested. It would be good media attention as well, there is already significant focus on the conflict with the wardens. The collapse of a Citadel member, even one that has broken ties with us, will catch the attention of the people. Spiritus sighed and said, this will be the second time in less than a century that an interstellar species experiences a societal collapse. Considering the usual stability of advanced civilizations, it shows a concerning trend. The Quarians created their own problems with the creation of the Geth, Valern pointed out. Much as the Batarians have created this problem by clinging onto such a barbaric practice. Even the wardens have shown that they are hardly immune to such weaknesses. That the UEG did not collapse alongside the Covenant is only due to their impressive defiance in the face of annihilation. It might be a weakness shared by the Systems Alliance, Tavos pointed out softly. At the curious looks sent her way, she explained, each of our governments is a unified alliance of sometimes disparate interests pushing towards a greater goal, each of us elected to represent their interest in the success of that pursuit. The Systems Alliance was created in the shadow of their war with the Covenant, and held together in the face of the Wardens by their abandonment to that same force. That glue will only hold for so long before it fails, especially given how short the memory of humanity seems to stretch. An irritated huff came from the Turian councillor as he grumbled, I still maintain that accepting a human spectre was a mistake, they have not been a member of the council long enough to earn the honor of a seat. I understand the benefits of tying the alliance to the Citadel, but the risk their connections to the rest of their kind represent is not insignificant. An argument we are well aware of, Valern replied. We have given up too much to not take advantage of their knowledge. The alliance represents the opportunity for this council to contend with the wardens. The STG has already determined that we lack the technological capability to handle the challenges they represent. This is an unacceptable state of affairs, and as such we need to pursue every possible avenue of closing that gap. You are quite resolute in the conclusion of our inferiority, Tavos observed. Valern shook his head and corrected, we hold the advantage in several areas, enough to at least maintain our status in this galaxy. As I said, the Wardens do not have the capability to take and hold the entirety of Citadel territory, but that does not mean they are not capable of causing immense damage. Given what we have seen of their fleets in action against elements in the Terminus, I will admit that I harbor some concerns as to the ability of the hierarchy to meet them in direct conflict, Sparatus said. Thus why we need the alliance, Tavos replied. I know, I am simply expressing my dislike of the situation, Sparatus grumbled. Understandable, Valern interjected. We are making progress in understanding the requirements for utilizing slip space, energy shielding, and other such innovations. Tavos seemed doubtful as she corrected, progress is optimistic. We understand what is necessary and where we fall short, this is more than we had before, Valern argued. So how close are we to having something that might actually work? Sparatus pushed. Decades, at least, Tavos responded quickly. The Turian scoffed and stated, we don't have that much time, not with the Wardens establishing a foothold in the Terminus. Our fleets are only as effective as our information, and that is clearly sorely lacking. Without any options to intercept and force engagements, the hierarchy cannot guarantee the safety of Citadel assets. Teams are working on the problem, there is nothing we can do to support them that is not already being done, Tavos replied. Has there been any sign of resistance from the Alliance in helping with these projects? Sparatus asked. Valern was the one to answer, STG assets are heavily involved, and while there have been individual instances of problems, there has been no concerted, organized effort to impede our progress. Without the help of the Alliance, I would expect this to take another order of magnitude longer, centuries rather than decades, Tavos added. I understand your frustration, Sparatus, I truly do, but we are working with something that we have no experience with. Even knowledgeable as the Alliance might be in working with slip space, even they admit that they are quite possibly millennia behind the technology that the Wardens have shown to possess. Everything we have built is based on EZO, and while it is clear that we have accomplished incredible feats with such, it is also clear that we have become sorely lacking in experience with alternative technological approaches. I am well aware of those facts, but we are discussing the encroachment of the Wardens on Citadel territory. A solution that may appear after our defeat is no solution, the Turian countered. The Terminus has maintained its independence from our influence, regardless of our efforts to the contrary, the Asari corrected. Until such a time as the Wardens violate Citadel territory, as in actual planets owned by member species, we are better treating the situation with a soft touch while giving the Union time to gather information on our potential enemy. There will come a time when the might of the hierarchy will be called upon to face the Wardens, and we are doing everything possible to ensure when that time comes your fleets will be the victor. Sparatus sighed and nodded as he responded, I understand, and thank you for that effort. I am simply concerned that it will not be enough, not with our position as unfavorable as it seems. A fair concern, Valern agreed. The situation is antithetical to the entirety of Solarian doctrine, so I and almost all of the STG share your concerns. However, there is one factor that the hierarchy may be missing, especially considering the understandable skepticism of such claims. It took a few seconds before the Turian concluded, the Reaper rumors. Exactly, the Solarian confirmed. The Wardens seemed oddly concerned with the threat of such stories being reality, even with absolutely no proof of their existence. While I am sure we are all very interested in why they are so concerned about such a ridiculous possibility, it does ensure that the Wardens exercise caution when operating in our galaxy. The STG predicts that without an inciting incident the Wardens will be unwilling to risk direct conflict with Citadel forces so long as they believe the threat of these Reapers exists. If they believe it at all and are not simply laughing at us, Sparatus pointed out. Whatever inhibitions they may have, it clearly did not stop them from engaging in conflict with the Terminus. Clearly that assumption is far too weak to be relied upon, and was never enough to be considered a proper defense against their aggression. All true, but it may at least buy us some time, Valern countered. The Turian didn't argue as he ceded, if nothing else I suppose. Putting aside those factors which we cannot control, let us focus on those we can. You said that there was progress, meager though it may be. We have begun to understand the fundamental principles of how these slipspace drives function, on a basic level, but at least it is something. Obviously the specifics are far beyond any of us, but from what has been reported by the teams working with the Alliance it is a good start. Obviously the complete lack of education on many of the concepts has hindered efforts, but there was no avoiding that. Even if we did have education programs suited for these fields, the bulk of the effort involves reverse engineering and manufacturing the components necessary to build more drives, Tavos summarized. The Systems Alliance has thousands, don't they? What is the issue with those? Sparatus inquired. Tavos sighed, her own frustration clear as she explained, I asked the same, and apparently the Alliance is already struggling with maintenance on their existing drives. Most of the advanced manufacturing capability of humanity was in the inner colonies, whereas the Systems Alliance was created from those fleeing as the outer colonies were surrendered to the Covenant. That is a whole different socio-political problem, but what it means for us now is that the Alliance is trying to create that area of expertise from what few engineers and scientists they have. Are we certain they aren't hindering us on purpose? The Turian suggested. When Tavos looked at Valern, the Solarian frowned and answered, not impossible, but unlikely. The STG is aware of significant societal issues with the Alliance, which is what led us to perform the analysis I mentioned before. It is not surprising that they would struggle, much like the Quarians they essentially existed as a migrant fleet rather than an organized civilization. Part of our goal in granting them a seat on this council is to provide an element of stability, to prevent them from falling apart at an inopportune time. All right, yes, they are getting a seat, let's not go back into that, Sparatus grumbled. If they have so many drives, especially ones which they are struggling to maintain, then surely we have a plentiful number of test beds for integration with our own technology. Understanding how this method of FTL works and how these drives function is only a part of the larger problem, yes, Tavos granted. Even if we were to solve that tomorrow, I am told that we still face an immense hurdle in that all of our technology is based on MassEffect. Obviously not every single thing, but anything advanced enough to be relevant uses element 0. Now for most things that is acceptable, possibly even superior, but not in regards to power generation. These slip-space drives take immense amounts of energy to operate, and that is not even including the engines and shielding and weapons that the Wardens also utilize. Quite simply, we do not have the power on board our ships to run these machines. Now, this is a far more approachable problem because at the very least we have existing research into alternative methods of power generation. Some of them are following the same techniques as what the Alliance uses, some possibly even the Covenant, but that research has always been an afterthought. Unnecessary, unneeded, in many cases a complete waste. What it does mean is that we have a basis for understanding how we may achieve the energy necessary to run a slip-space drive, albeit with significant caveats that I don't care to get into, Tavos explained. To his credit, Sparatus quickly understood the problem as he muttered, which would need to be integrated into our existing ships or built into new models. Precisely, Tavos confirmed. This above all is what will take time and resources. Our fleets are not prepared or equipped to field this sort of technology, and it is good to remember that we are still talking about the vastly inferior slip-space methods that humanity used for some time. The Wardens have already shown significantly more advanced and capable use of slip-space from their post-war vessels, which they have as much as told us is from their discovery of these forerunners. We know we are fighting a battle we may have already lost, competing in a race of technology in which we are only falling further behind, Valern said, picking up from his Asari counterpart. Fortunately we are following a path we know exists, so there is no doubt as to possibility, regardless of our concerns about feasibility. Chasing your enemy is rarely the correct choice. I am surprised that you are not advocating to attempt an approach they are not expecting, the Turian noted. Valern frowned and responded, that would be very risky, though probably possible. We travel in FTL with MassEffect, the Wardens with slip space, it is not hard to imagine there being several more possibilities. To find them, to bet the security of our species on that? Not in these circumstances. I understand, Sparatus admitted. I am worried that the Wardens follow in the steps of their own proteins, steps which we would be very hard-pressed to recreate. Certainly, the Solarian agreed. To surpass the Wardens is a goal far beyond our ability to plan for at this moment, so for now we content ourselves with what we can feasibly accomplish. Our own advancements have been largely due to protein knowledge, and while we still have much to learn it is clearly not enough. With the capability to utilize slip space we may break free of the relays, to strike at our enemies much as they may us, to even the field in some regard. There were a few seconds of silence before the Turian counselor huffed and commented, this must have been a conversation the humans held in their war with the Covenant. An enemy with which they could not contend, desperately hoping for something to survive annihilation. The Wardens are not set on a campaign of genocide against us, Tavos replied. Yet, Sparatus interjected. Just so, the Asari continued calmly, that may be a somewhat extreme comparison, though I do understand the thought. The Turian waved a hand dismissively and stated, regardless, what we know is that our current fleets will not be able to support slip-space drives due to the power requirements. I think I need not say it, but rebuilding our fleets with this technology would be impossible to hide. It would certainly catch the attention of the Wardens, and even more importantly the attention of everyone else in the galaxy. We would need to integrate advancements in phases, allowing an adjustment period so as to not upset things too much. Obviously there would be pushback from companies whose entire business revolves around element 0, whether it is weapons, ships, or power generation. Given the disruption that even a cursory analysis predicts, it is perfectly understandable why the Wardens have not integrated our technology into their ships. Obviously their association with the Quarians indicates some interest in MassEffect, but it is unlikely that we will see any serious shift outside of some civilian efforts, Valern said. Why not? Surely there's something MassEffect can offer them, Sparatus pressed. Tavos answered, the most obvious problem they face is the same one we do, they do not understand the technology because it is not something they have ever encountered before. Just because they understand slipspace doesn't mean that they can understand the applications of element 0, though the Quarians will certainly help overcome that. Even if they were to understand it, they have no supply of EZO, especially not with the numbers of ships we have observed in their fleets. They also face a significant issue when it comes to mass, Valern added. Our ships are limited by the size of the MassEffect field, but while theirs are not, so too does that mean that they cannot simply implement EZO cores onto their vessels. This is how they are able to reach the power requirements necessary for their technology. Rather than worrying about building a smaller reactor, they just build the ship large enough to hold such an enormous structure. Of course, with the larger vessel comes a requirement for larger engines, and yet another problem which EZO cores solve for our current craft. The Turian considered that as he responded, I know that human vessels used to utilize massive fusion torches for propulsion, a crude but effective solution given their reactors. I presume that would be our initial approach as well, or would we attempt to utilize the gravity fields that are equipped on modern human vessels? Artificial gravity is understood well enough to make repulsor engines feasible, though concealing their signature would be enormously difficult should we need stealth craft, Valern replied. Our baffling for heat dispensation would be hard-pressed to handle the output of fusion engines of the size required to move slipspace-capable vessels, but it is possible. Ultimately the STG hopes to pursue both solutions, as at least one will be needed to propel a vessel that lacks an EZO core. Obviously fusion torches would be much closer to our current engine designs, but do we have the expertise to spare in regards to trying to research the repulsor engines? Sparatus asked. Valern seemed resigned as he answered, it is difficult to predict the possible returns on that research, especially given that the Alliance has no experience with such technology. This is what concerns Solarian designers, because even if we build a small number of vessels capable of slipspace travel, that is still an enormous investment in infrastructure to handle such an effort. Our current shipyards would need to be completely rebuilt, Sparatus agreed. More than that, Tavos stated, the entire supply line to create these ships doesn't exist. Our designers are not familiar with such scale, our facilities are not prepared for it, and the cost for materials to build each ship will be significant. Valern nodded and added, this also does not include training, crews would have to be educated on this technology, engineers replaced. How committed are the Union and Republics to this approach? Sparatus questioned. The more I hear the more concerned I am that we will not be able to implement this in hierarchy fleets. Our doctrine is well established and better suited for control of relays, our strikes into Krogan territory during the rebellions were made off the relay network. You are not interested in applying this technology to hierarchy vessels? Valern inquired with a bit of surprise. Sparatus shook his head and clarified, eventually, certainly, but not now. The hierarchy has the largest fleet in the galaxy, I feel comfortable in that assumption even with the Wardens carrying out their campaign in the Terminus. An experimental vessel, or even a fleet of them, is far more the domain of Solarians or Aseri than it is the hierarchy. I believe that the cost will be prohibitive, in a multitude of ways, until their worth is proven in the field. Whether that is gathering intelligence or as a strike force is irrelevant, just some action that shows their value. Replacing hierarchy fleets was always going to be difficult by numbers alone, Valern admitted. The Turians are the primary fighting force of the Citadel, it would be odd if you do not field craft that can challenge even dreadnoughts, Tavos countered. And in time we will, but for now it is my position that the hierarchy is better suited to defending Citadel territory. Once we have the information necessary to actually contend with the Wardens, to strike at their positions in our galaxy, then I will not argue against this, Sparatus said. He huffed and added, I also think we will be in a better position to produce these ships at scale when that time comes. Tavos and Valern shared a glance, the Solarian shrugging before the Aseri responded, understood, we shall keep you apprised of the status of the program. Thank you, I should hope that we do need such craft any time soon, Sparatus replied. He paused before asking, a quick word before we move on, has there been any consideration as to the use of Alliance vessels for material? Valern nodded and answered, indeed, it was determined to be prohibitively difficult to move that much material through the relay to our galaxy. Not impossible by any means, but there would be little gained in doing so. As for constructing vessels in Alliance space, the possibility of information breaches would be higher as well as put those facilities in much easier striking distance should the Wardens decide on that course. Fair reasons, Sparatus stated, not at all surprised at the conclusion. Unless there is anything else, shall we move on? Indeed, Tavos agreed. Since we are already discussing the Alliance, it is worth noting that they are nominating a councillor to hold the seat until proper elections can be arranged. The Alliance Ambassador's office has informed us that one Anita Goyle has been dispatched from the Systems Alliance and will arrive on the Citadel within the week. Sparatus thought for a moment before noting, I do not believe I've heard of someone by that name. You'll get along with her, Tavos assured him. She's a politician from one of the outer colonies that was destroyed by the Covenant. She's blunt, stubborn, and committed to her job. Already talked to Benazia? Valern asked. Of course, the Aseri councillor confirmed. Apparently Miss Goyle has a reputation for being rather adept at cutting through political machinations. It will be interesting to see how she handles the delicate politics of the citadel, though from what Benezia has said she won't have much of a problem adjusting. Spiritus hummed and stated, I find it more concerning as to the reaction of other members of the citadel. The alliance is still fairly isolated for a member state, to be granting them a seat when most members still see them as outsiders has led to tensions. The alliance cannot strain relations with the citadel given their tenuous position, Tavos replied. It makes little sense for them to alienate potential allies by causing problems with existing political disputes. Even the other species in the Wardens have warned that humanity can be less than predictable, Valerne warned. Tavos tilted her head and acquiesced, this is true, but if it becomes a problem then we shall address it as necessary. Has there been any word from the Alliance Navy about increased ship production? Spiritus inquired of the Solarian. The Alliance has been building up their forces without pause since joining the Council. The STG has not seen any increase since they gained a seat, but neither is there a decrease. It is likely that they are already producing at full capacity and any further efforts will require time and space to set up, Valerne answered. Not bad for a species so inexperienced with EZO, Spiritus begrudgingly granted. How has their new ship performed, the Normandy? Valerne responded, the ship is moving towards the terminus, but has not been flying under stealth given that they are still in Citadel territory. STG will not alert them as to the effectiveness of their systems since Warden assets are aboard and may be able to surmise the limits of Solarian scanning from that information. I'll be curious to see how it functions against the Geth, and even more so against the Wardens, Tavos commented. Hopefully that learning won't be done at the end of a mass accelerator, Spiritus said. The Wardens won't fire on a ship with their own people on it, but the Geth will have no such inhibitions. Considering that the STG has had trouble penetrating the veil to observe the Geth, I doubt that the Normandy would be able to do any better. Spectre Valkyrian may have some interesting perspectives, but he knows that observation does not necessitate direct intervention should they find Geth activity, the Solarian responded. The Turian nodded and replied, Valkyrian has a good head on his shoulders, hopefully allowing him and Arterius the freedom to look into their concerns about the Reapers will allow him to focus on more immediate issues. One can only hope, Tavos agreed. They are both effective spectres, and they are hardly the first to have concerns outside those assigned by the Council. Vazir? Spiritus asked. Of course, the Aseri confirmed. I doubt that Shepard will find much trace of her given the chaos in the terminus, but that doesn't mean that someone else found her first. Valerne frowned and said, there have been reports of refugees being displaced by the Wardens, usually slaves retrieved from disabled vessels. Putting aside the possibility that they possess a weapon capable of disabling EZO cores or if their AI are responsible, if Vazir was undercover on one of those ships she may have been taken to whatever world the Wardens have claimed. Recovering that intelligence would be immensely helpful to our efforts, especially if she manages to maintain a low profile. She has dealings with the Shadow Broker, correct? Spiritus asked. Vazir has always been one to flaunt rules, Tavos replied. I know that the STG was tracking her communications to the broker, I assume there has been no activity. Not that has been reported, Valerne replied. Even were she trying to be careful, she has never been as good as she thinks she is. Tavos huffed but didn't argue as she stated, regardless, that intelligence is something that we cannot have escaping into the broader information networks. Usually I have no issue overlooking a Spectre's impropriety, especially when the Spectre proves as effective as Vazir has been, but this is too important to risk such a leak. The STG is already investigating, and it is possible that Spectre Shepard may be able to find something from the Warden soldiers on her crew, Valerne stated. Perhaps, though given their reputation I have my doubts, Spiritus admitted. I still find it curious how the Wardens are aggressively pushing into the terminus while simultaneously fostering the illusion of cooperation by agreeing to a joint deployment. It is possible that cooperation is just an excuse, they did send a team of their Spartans, the Solarian noted. From what the STG has gathered, the leader of that ground is effectively a fleet admiral in the UNSC, and a legend amongst the Wardens. For one accustomed to command to agree to serve under a commander, or even a Spectre, is very strange. Tavos scoffed and replied, separating myth from reality has proven difficult when it comes to Spartans, and even more so with the Master Chief. At the very least Benezia was able to discuss the matter with some Alliance personnel, and the report she gave was certainly intriguing. The Master Chief is their savior of the galaxy, yes? Spiritus inquired. Indeed, the Aseri confirmed. Following the conclusion of the Covenant War he has continued addressing some of the largest threats facing humanity, as well as those facing the Wardens. As you might have realized, this means that the goal of the Wardens by joining the Normandy might be to pursue leads in regards to the Reapers. If they wish to waste their time chasing ghosts, then all the better, Spiritus muttered. He frowned and added, I am surprised that the command structure of the Wardens would allow such a thing. Valerne interjected, we believe that the Spartans operate somewhat like our Spectres, perhaps not with the complete immunity they enjoy but in regards to handling more delicate and challenging tasks. Given the status of the chief, it is likely that so long as he is not actively murdering entire cities or something else ridiculous, he is left to pursue whatever issues he finds important. So long as Shepard does not pit the Normandy against the Wardens or their interests, the chief will entertain her orders in the interest of utilizing the freedom spectres enjoy. Hence dispatching the Normandy to the terminus, Sparatus concluded. Precisely, the Solarian confirmed. I do not expect them to cause issues, but better to let them do it where most of the galaxy will not see or care. When no one spoke for a few seconds, Tavos checked her Omni tool and stated, unless anyone has anything else, we have some time before our next arrangement. The extra time to prepare would be appreciated, Valerne responded. Sparatus didn't argue, instead just nodding his agreement. Then I will see you both shortly in the public chambers, Tavos said, standing and making her way out of the room. Valerne and Sparatus followed shortly after, both heading to their offices as they handled the endless business that faced the council. August 27, 2589/20th day of 9th month, 2459/August 27, 2180. Pax System. Novaria. The ships that arrived to transport her and her workers sang a multitude of songs, each twisted together with notes of hate and fear and the bonds of brothers. In her time waiting for her freedom to be granted she had met many who held such notes, and though they did well to hide them from each other it was impossible to hide them from her. Even with the clear fractures between them, there were no notes of conflict amongst the various individuals that came to talk with her. Each had their questions about all different kinds of things, some leaving disappointed while others appeared excited by her answers. None held the notes of those who came before, but they sang of different notes to find amidst the stars. It was the promise of an entirely new tapestry upon which the Rachni may write their song which she held in her mind as she stepped onto their ships, her children dutifully following behind as they emerged from their tunnels into a massive space of metal and light. Even with the entire colony aboard they had space to spare, their movements watched by those who had offered to spare them from extinction. Soon enough she felt the song of the only planet she had ever known fall away, the vast silence of the void beyond worlds leaving her to listen to the artificial notes of the ship around her. And then, finally, there was a shift as she heard a song which had existed only in the memories, a haunting melody as reality itself gave way to the beautiful tune of higher dimensions. The notes were muddled, clearly a crude recreation of what once was, but so too was the song muffled and broken in the memories. From the thousands of queens that had existed since the time when those who came before there were hints of the song, though only as a distant recollection. Aside from a brief interruption from those who could not hear the song, she was left to relax and lose herself amidst the notes as the ship ferried her to her new home. When the time finally came for the ship to break free and slide back into reality, she bid the ancient notes a fond farewell as she wondered if she would ever hear them again. Soon the haunting melody of slip space was gone, replaced by the pleasant tune of the approaching planet as the ship broke into the atmosphere. Lost in the notes of her new home, it was only when she was stepping out onto fresh soil that she heard the subtle notes that only graced her presence once before. It did not take her long to find the source, the soft beauty of those who came before quickly leading her to the inheritor of those whose song has ceased. It did not wear armor, instead adorned in simple clothes as it greeted her, hello, and welcome to your new world. Thank you for reading, I know it is a bit rough but I hope you enjoyed. Until next time. This fanfiction is an ongoing work in progress, latest chapter is 29.